about 1 kilohertz wide, and additionally, it has the lowest minimum signal-to-noise ratio requirement, so about -2 decibel signal-to-noise ratio. And that's, if you compare that to what's typically cited for single sideband, that's potentially up to an 8 decibel improvement in your reception. So that's really, really nice if the band conditions aren't that great. And there's also 700E. It handles fast fading a little bit better. So say like if you're operating NVIS, but it needs a little bit more signal to noise ratio versus 700D. And there's also 1600, which is, it's still used, but not as often. It's mainly used for satellite communication. And because there's a carrier in the middle of the Doppler, or rather, there's a carrier in the middle which helps with Doppler tracking, and that's really important for satellite stuff. And then finally, there's 2020, and as I mentioned, it's the highest quality mode that's currently available. It's not as good on the as the other modes in terms of being able to be copied, especially when the bands aren't that good. But when the bands are really good, it's definitely worthwhile to try. And most of the time, FreeDV will automatically detect the mode that's currently being transmitted by the other person and decode that mode accordingly. But you'll still need to choose a mode to transmit. So on the right-hand side, there's a mode selector, and you can just choose that mode. And you can additionally just change modes while you're transmitting as well. And if you're familiar from FreeDV from way back in the old days, that wasn't the case, and you had to restart FreeDV. So that definitely was an improvement there. And there's also a couple hardware options as well. One option is the SM1000. It's currently $195. It supports 700D and E as well as 1600. Fortunately, there's not enough processing power to support 2020, which is why it doesn't currently do it. The nice thing about the SM1000 is it only needs an RJ45 cable for your radio, as well as 12-volt power. So it's really good if you, say, want to operate POTO or SOTA, or just operate portably in general. And you can get it from Tindy. If you go to tindy.com and just search for SM1000, it's there. You can also stop by the FreeDV booth later, and there's a QR code you can scan to look that up if you're interested. There's also the EasyDV, which we just came out with at Dayton. It's similar to the SM1000 in that it has a microcontroller in it, and it supports the same modes as the SM1000, so 700D, E, and 1600. It doesn't have a microphone and speaker built in. It requires a wired headset configured for the Android standard. But the nice thing, because we're using an ESP32, it has Wi-Fi built in, so it can do cat control and PTT or cat control and audio rather, for the IC705 as well as the Flex 6000 and 8000 series. So you could potentially have a wireless setup, especially with the Flex, because it routes all of the audio through Smart SDR. So you only really need to open our Smart SDR to be able to use FreeDV once this is set up. And in addition, there's a battery in it, 2,000 milliamp hours, so you can operate a full day potentially. And if you happen to run out of power during that, there's charging to USB-C as well. And then if you're not using a Wi-Fi, you can also wire up a cable. There's a 3.5 millimeter jack on the bottom for your wired headset, of course, as well as push-to-talk and audio. And if you're interested in finding out a lot more about this, you can go to the FreeDV booth, booth 1909. And if you want to buy one, you can go to the Tapper booth in Building 5. Or after Dayton, the prices will go up after Dayton. So definitely worthwhile to buy it today or this weekend. But if you want to buy a second one later, or if you just don't have time during this weekend, you can go on the line on tapper.org for that. And there's source code and firmware versions as well on the GitHub, github.com/tmiw/easydv. So I think we don't have that much time, so I'm just going to go quickly through this. There's a couple ways you can find contacts online. Main way is FreeDV Reporter, which is what you might have saw on the screen earlier. qso.freedv.org. So basically what's nice about this is it shows a live status. So for example, if you go into transmit, you'll show up as transmitting on here pretty much immediately. And if you happen to receive someone, you'll show that you received that person pretty much immediately as well. There's also a chat room on there, which is tied to our Discord. So you can chat with other people and arrange contacts that way as well.
who will then go ahead and bring up the moderators. So, next speaker is... Okay. So, next speaker is coming in, I think, in just a moment. We're all saddened by the loss of Bob Heil, but hey, no tears. Bob lived a full life and brought to the amateur community broadcast type of audio. And he was also a visual on amateur television receive, but he liked to sort of stay in the background. And while he did watch it on Whereby, he was always sort of silent. But he gave me some notes about 6 months ago as he was convalescing, and they're sort of funny. He says, for those of you going to the Holiday Inn for the DX dinner, they're going to be using all natural food for the banquet dinner, all natural. Because at our age, we need all the preservatives we can get. And Bob says, before you criticize anyone on the airwaves, walk a mile in their shoes. That way, when you do criticize them, you're a mile away and they ain't got any shoes at all. So, in honor of Bob Heil, Bob, we're going to miss you, but do know he led such a full life and he was such an impact to the amateur radio service. So now I will turn you over to those that would like to begin to moderate the Amateur Television Network. And Gary, why don't you come up, and we're holding for the ATN crew, and tell us about your switch to going from analog to digital, and what it takes to get a good signal, and the importance of coax and big coax. Here's Gary and Debbie. They've been helping me out get my station going again. So just a few words about our ATN nets. We're in Phil. Go ahead.
Oh, very good. Yes. Well, I'm actually kind of new to this, so I've only been doing this for about 3 or 4 months. But I tried going analog at 2.4 gigahertz and found out that I had a tree in the way. So you know how that goes. A tree's a crowd, right? So that took care of that. And so I went 434 megahertz. And I was doing AM for a while there, but it just wasn't enough signal to get to Santiago Peak, which is about 30 miles away from me. So I do have a clean shot. And then I went digital with the high-des equipment. How many people know what I'm talking about with the high-des digital? Yeah, DVB-T, that's it, rather than satellite. And I'm having pretty good luck with that. I'm still having a little bit of breakup because of some digital interference at Santiago Peak, but that's a really, really nice picture, really nice audio, and so I'm very impressed with the digital picture. So, and you're still analog, so.
So now you can say you saw him live and direct. Well, Art is here, Mike is here, the whole team is here. So Art, I'll turn it over to you at this point, I believe. And we've already come up with my great entertainment and welcome. And you're on.
Thank you, Gordon.
Boy, that's something that takes care of me introducing Gordon.
We have fun.
Such a quiet man usually.
I show up 5 minutes early and find out I'm 5 minutes late. Hold on just a second here. Oh, not a problem. I'm glad you're here because I wouldn't know where it was. It's on a flash drive. I don't know where to look.
I'm assuming it's ATV form presentation?
Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
Okay, now will my clicker work? Okay. So where are you at here now? What? I want to run the slideshow here.
Well, I'm all screwed up. I was 10 minutes early. So for those of you for the early warm-up, that was your intermission and your interlude to Art, who is the main man on today's seminar. That's what happens when you're on the West Coast, but Mike will explain that later. So Art, I think we've warmed him up. On the count of three, though, we're making a recording. Let's hear your call signs as if this were a pile-up on 1.2 gigs. Digital. Ready? Call signs. 1, 2, 3. Ah, that's called a tail ender. He waits till you all go first. All right. Well, for those that endured the 10 minutes early, welcome aboard to amateur television. And you now have the live faces behind some of the screenshots that you have seen. And here's Art.
Are you getting this, or do you want it bigger?
Well, I'd like to be able to read that if that's larger.
This is the next slide. This slide is the next slide.
Oh, really? Oh, how do I see? Is it, oh, okay. It doesn't show it that way on the on there.
Right. Yep. It's just for you. It's just
Okay. Okay.
Are you okay with that?
Okay.
Just make sure you use the microphone.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Art. I'm WA8RMC. I'm the host for the for the ATB forum, and we got a nice we've got a nice spot in 1003, 1004. In which building is it? I forget which building it is. Anyway, building 1. Okay, so that's the rest. Okay, what I've got is that you got me off into a different thing from where I'm used to looking at it. What I'd like to talk about is the comparison for digital and analog television. Like to start off by saying most people know what analog television is like, but not introduced to digital television at all. So I'd like to give some examples of the advantages and disadvantages of both analog and digital television. So here we go. Amateur television. First of all, the analog characteristics. Is that right?
No, it flipped back. It was there and it flipped back.
There. Okay. Now you see where we're at. For analog ATV characteristics, basically it's the simplest mode for amateur television. That's nice because it serves as a beginning for anybody that's not familiar with it. It's a little bit easier to get started in something like that than anything in digital. Okay, it's advantage of it. It's good for DX operation. DX, you're interested in just being able to see something. You're not interested in high quality. So it's the idea of being able to see something or not at all as far as television is concerned. So it's good for DX operation. It's the least expensive of all the modes. The equipment is basically obsolete now, but it's available. If you keep your eyes open in the flea market, it's available there. And so it's the least expensive to get started. It's the relaxed amplifier linearity requirements. You can have the least good, least quality of the amplifiers and still get a decent picture with analog. Digital is quite different. I'll explain that in a minute here. It's got relaxed, the bandwidth is greater than digital modes. Doesn't have to be, but in general, it is greater than digital modes. Digital modes, you can narrow the bandwidth down to suit the application, the saving spectrum space, and it allows more people to be operating in the same band alongside each other. The sound is, just as a separate point, the sound is separate from the subcarrier signal. You can include sound, or you can add sound, or not have sound. You can just picture it, it's okay. It's a real-time signal. And you'll see when I explain the digital modes that what you see is what you get. There's no delay. There's no what we call latency in the system. It's real-time. It's very handy if you're trying to operate duplex or talk to somebody. There's no delay. You don't have to wait for it. It's normally a lower resolution signal. If you got DX operation, you don't care whether it's a fuzzy or whether it's a out of focus signal or a low resolution signal. You just look and see is the signal there. So it's normally lower resolution than a digital signal. Okay. There's a picture of some of the obsolete, I say they're all obsolete. The top one is a PC electronics unit, companion receivers. I show these mainly so that you can recognize them here. So if you happen to spot something in the flea market that somebody says, hey, you know, I want $5 for this, you know whether you're getting something that you recognize. Going the wrong way again. Okay, for comparison, there's some of the digital television equipment. The top left is the HV100E. This is made by Hi-Des in Taiwan. They're the primary vendor for digital television equipment, and that's kind of what it looks like. Below that is the HV110. It's a simple digital receiver. Cost is about $120. I'm going the wrong way again. Okay, now just an analog, I've got an analog versus digital signal reporting type of thing. Is that what's the signal look like from an analog and digital perspective? Analog, it's in picture units, P0 through P6. Each P number is 6 dB in signal improvement or deterioration, depending which way you're going. And the first one you can see is just barely a recognizable picture. It's something you say the signal is there, but you don't really know what it is. What do you see digital? It's a blue screen, nothing, absolutely nothing. P1's getting a little bit better, and now what do you see digital? It's a perfect picture. So it's, with analog, it's the signal gradients as it gets better, and better, until you get what we call a P5 picture. And digital, it's P5 from the get-go. So that's the difference in digital and analog as far as signal is concerned. Okay, analog advantages over digital. It's a good starter project for the hobby. It's the easiest to implement. I'm duplicating some efforts here, but I'll let you know. And it's low cost. Surplus equipment is available at Hamfest, like I just mentioned. It's good for DX operation. And that's about it as I know it. Now, the digital advantages over analog. The picture quality, as you saw in the previous sequence, the picture quality is near perfect all the time, except when you get right to the noise level. And that's what they like for DX operation and analog. You can see the picture, but you don't really care what the quality is, just the fact that you've recognized it. So, okay, noise and multipath cancellation is possible. That means that if you got tall buildings in the area or mountains in the area, that you get echoes or reflections. In analog, you get severe ghosting, and everybody knows what the ghosting in the analog picture is like. We haven't forgotten the old analog days. But digital, that takes care of that. And so that you don't see any ghosting, the processor takes care of the cancellation until the ghosting gets so bad that it can't handle it. then you get what we call pixelization. It's the pixels jump all over the place, or it just goes to a blank screen. Normally, digital occupies less bandwidth. It can be greater if you go on to transmit high definition TV, and that you can do also with digital, but normally you'd operate with a narrower bandwidth. At ATCO in Columbus, Ohio, we use a 2 megahertz bandwidth, which is satisfactory for most stuff. Analog takes up considerably more bandwidth, you'll see in a minute here. There's less transmit power required for a P5 picture. In general, that's the case, but we can explain that further if we want to go into more detail. And most important, it's always neat to be on the bragging rights. You get the bragging rights, say, hey, I've got a digital picture. You don't have anything like that. Boy, this is neat, okay? So that's important too, be able to brag about what you're doing. High resolution signals are possible with digital for HD TV, high definition television. Okay, just as an example, I've got the analog, here's an analog signal. That's an analog signal, the peak signal there, and these little warps on either side are the sound subcarriers, below and above the carrier. And that takes up typically about 13 megahertz of band space. Not all of it is high signal, but it does take up that much room. Unless you supply filters, it takes up more than a 6 megahertz bandwidth. There's a DVB, in comparison, there's a DVB-S signal, that's a satellite format. It occupies 4 megahertz in that manner, and it could be a smaller, it could be 2 megahertz. So there's a spectrum saving right off the dig that. Okay, we're into digital. Let's DVB-S and S2. There's two basic forms of digital formats. There are more than that. There's a handheld, there's a smartphone, and different formats that are seldom used. But basically, there's two formats. DVB-S is the commercial satellite format. That's the format that every commercial user has for all the satellites globally. And it's the general commercial standard format. It's most widely used in Europe on the 1200 to 13 megahertz band for DATV, for television, for ham use on 23 centimeters, they use DVB-S. Transmit boards are expensive and difficult to build. Yes, they are, but there are some available. Signal is not real time. There is a delay of between 1 and 2 seconds. In some cases, the delay may get excessive, more than 2 seconds. But it's typically about a 1 to 2 second latency or delay time between when the signal first appeared and when you see it. The format is QPSK. It's short for quad phase shift keying. That's the official name, QPSK. There are other modes, COFDM. Want to go down the highway at 65 miles an hour, it works pretty good. You'll notice that the ATSC format for digital television in the United States quits when you get to anything above walking speed. It is intended to not handle echoes and cancellation very well. Bandwidth is modifiable. In other words, it's not a fixed format bandwidth. If you have a situation where a couple people want to operate close to one another, you can narrow the bandwidth of each one, operate independently, and you put the signal close to each other and still operate significantly. It's easy to have multiple video channels in a single carrier. Generally, I don't think anybody's going to do that, but you can buy equipment that puts multiple video channels on your one carrier. I do have one situation at our repeater at ATCO in Columbus where we put 2 video channels on the 1200 megahertz carrier, and we can see 2 separate RF inputs. So you can multiplex it and have more than 2, but we do 2. I don't know of anyone else that is putting multiple video signals on one carrier, but it can be done. Okay, DVB-T, is it the best? Well, it's very good for narrow bandwidth EX operation, as I've mentioned before, on 70 centimeters. Most of the time it's used on 70 centimeters. It is in Taiwan. They have some problems with their equipment. That's the bad news. The good news is they're very responsive to issues. We've noticed a number of problems with a natural rejection from signals off to the side so that multipath becomes less of an issue with high gain antennas. DVB-S and DVB-T comparisons, not all, but I have seen some comparisons. They're comparing the signal quality of DVB-S and DVB-T, but they have DVB-S at 1200 megahertz and DVB-T at 450 megahertz. If you're going to do a comparison, they should have them at the same frequency, but I've seen them compare them at different frequencies. Because DVB-S is used more frequently on 1200, they use the signal report on 1200 and compare it to a signal on 70 centimeters. Not fair, but beware, it has happened. There's about 9 dB more path loss from 430 to 1280, so you're going to get that much more path loss if you're transmitting on 1200 than you at 400. So, but the added gain at 1280 sometimes makes up the difference for a given size. So that's to be considered also. Okay, continuing. More cable loss at 1280 and 430. There's a couple, 2.5, 2.7 dB more loss at 450. The LMR 400 has 2.7 dB at 450 and 4.65 dB at 1250 per 100 feet. So there's about 2 dB more loss in the line. But the DVB-S that can be driven a little closer to compression can make up that difference. So the difference is not significant. They're relatively similar. DVB-T receivers for 430 are also available from High-Des. The model HV110, it's the simple digital receiver, is a complete 423 receiver, and it's available for about $120. However, DVB-S receivers for 430 megahertz are not readily available. I can change that. I'll explain that shortly. Summary. Most people in the USA use DVB-T for 430 and DVB-S for 1280. There are some exceptions, but in general, that's the way it is. Receiver availability becomes the main issue for DVB-S over DVB-T. Beware, model DVB-T operates on 430 and uses 1, 2, or 4 megahertz bandwidths. The some commercial receivers that you may get for DVB-T will only do 6 and 8 megahertz bandwidths. If you find out that you get a commercial receiver that has a 6 or 8 megahertz bandwidth built into it, it will not work for the ham use with 1, 2, or 4 megahertz bandwidths. And for the most part, we all use 1, 2, or 4 megahertz bandwidths unless somebody wants to experiment with some high definition stuff. Just beware, it can be an issue. So, do you use DVB-S or DVB-T? All this sort of stuff combined. Well, it depends. Use DVB-S on 23 centimeters, mainly because of an inexpensive set-top box with free-to-air commercial receivers. Use DVB-T on 70 centimeters for DX narrowband operation using high-des receivers, or check your local repeater functions, what they use. Both DVB-S and DVB-T can be used for repeater operation. So the bottom line of this whole thing is you're pretty much stuck, if you want to operate with a repeater, you're pretty much stuck with whatever they've set up for the repeater. So, but when you're setting up for a repeater, a lot of this information is somewhat critical to knowing it in the first place. Okay, I'm not going to get into any details, but there is a error. There's a plot for an error. There's a constellation arrangement, and that it's an MER modulation error ratio. It's a number that is applied commercially to measure the error that you can get when you transmit a signal. In other words, and the modulation error ratio is just a standard number. A number greater than 30 is good, and it measures the quality of a transmitted signal. I'm not going to go any further than that. EVM, error vector magnitude, is another high-tech number that is listed in percentage. And they use this when they're measuring the signal as it is received from the receiver. A good EVM is less than 5%. If you have 5% of error signals, pretty much the receivers can handle it. So just remember, MER is a straight number. Greater than 30 is good. EVM is a percentage. Less than 5% is good. So when you're striving to something, those two numbers are the main numbers that we use in calculating that sort of stuff. Okay, here's a real great eye chart. This is a chart that was a great eye chart. This is a chart that was done by a spectrum analyzer that shows the quadrants. Now they've got the physical quadrant. All the stuff on the outside here. Hello. Hello. There it is. Don't pay any attention to this. This is stuff that was calculated by the processor, and same thing with this. The only thing I wanted to zero in on is there is in QPSK, it's quads modulation, 4-quadrant modulation, and as it in that process, it generates these 4 little landing dots. So that's the spot in the quadrant that you have the data there. And that in this case, it's the original signal, and it's a real nice small red dot. If everybody can see, some people in the back can't see the red dot there. But that's all I wanted to point out is there's a real tight, real red dot on the transmitted signal. Now this is passed through an amplifier, and that in this particular case, 1.6 milliwatt signal is amplified up to 2.5 watts. And you saw the spectral regrowth before, but now in the landing dots, as it says, each landing dot, each time it grabs a sample, the landing dot is in a slightly different position. That's what generates the error. And as it goes through the signal chain, the dot gets a little bit larger. Okay, now what we've got is the landing dots that as it, where did I put it? As it comes out of a 2.5 watt amplifier, it's a little bit, that's the 18 watt. It's about that. But the dots are now spread out. It still is a good signal, but you see when they look at it, the high-tech equipment that they use to calculate the constellations, That's what they start measuring, is the quality of the signal and where the landing dots are. This is going back through into the data signal flow, the data flow. All I want to do is just show a quick block diagram that shows the beginning is the flow of the whole thing. You've got composite video. Get your fingers off of the LED art. Okay, you got composite video and analog. It goes into an MPEG encoder. You may have a multiplex be out, but it goes out of the encoder, goes into what I call that Reed-Solomon encoder before. It goes into then it goes into a randomizer, and then into a trellis encoder, which is a mapper. And there's 3 encoders that's part of the forward error correction circuitry. And then you have an output data flow from that's composed of a transport stream. So that's really the basic format, the basic functions of a digital signal there. Now the modulation flow from the data signal, it comes into a frame adaptation, and it's an IQ signal. It's a signal that's composed of an incident and a quadrature signal, which is 90 degrees out of phase. It goes through a digital analog converter for the incident channel and a digital analog converter on the quadrature channel. It goes through a low-pass filter to remove some of the extraneous stuff. The filters remove the digital oversampling. You always get oversampling and digital conversion. And then it goes into a modulator and an RF amplifier. Looks like simple, doesn't it? It is in some respects, but there's a lot more to it.
You don't have to build those things, it's in the black box.
Yeah, it's all in the black box. If you don't build it, it just goes in here, goes out there, and let it go at that. That's a signal flow that I have on a specific transmit board that I designed. And I just show it there to show you what we have of a transmitter that uses a computer to do all of the encoding and the error correction and that handles it. So that the analog comes in there and goes into an MPEG 2 encoder. And this is a PC. This is your personal computer, whatever format. This one uses Ubuntu, and then it goes into the DATV Express Exciter board. It's an FPGA-based device. This is about I'll show you a picture of it in a minute, but a 3 by 6 inch board. Goes to first stage power amplifier, second stage amplifier, comes out with 6 to 10 watts. But that's the whole thing there. That's what the transmit board physically looks like. I had these for sale. That it's a nonprofit thing. We formed a nonprofit company that we sell the boards just to recover the cost of building it, and that we started out selling them for about $300 a piece, and that end up reducing it down to about $175 a piece until two competitors came along. Lime Microsystems with their Lime board, and that Analog Devices with their Pluto board, and sold them for the same price. So we said, okay, that's fine, let's not sell them anymore, so we obsoleted it. It was actually a mistake. We should have kept on building them, but we didn't. But anyway, it gives you an idea of what I came up with to build the board and at least provide something for the hams that nobody had before that. That's now what I've got. I should have brought that unit with me. Run forward to today, I've designed another standalone receiver. I call it the Versatune. It's a standalone receiver. It's in a small 3 by 6 inch box that takes DVB-S or DVB-T, whichever one you want to work with, and displays it on a monitor. It's a scanning type of receiver. It's got a lot of features. One of the disk features it's got right now is the software doesn't work right. Well, it's software is the toughest thing, and I've got the hardware is physically designed. That's what it looks like. It's the interface board there. The main engine is a Raspberry Pi Model 4B. That's doing all the horsepower. But basically, we just have a small, it's a tuner, a purchased tuner inside, and we've got room for 2 tuners in there, and that the interface board and Raspberry Pi, and we hope to be able to sell it. And again, it's a non-profit type of thing. I'm not going to say what the price is because the longer time it takes to design it and build it, the price keeps going up, so I don't know. At this particular time, I do have a working, that is a working model that I'm expecting to possibly offer for sale the 3rd quarter of this year, maybe the 1st of next year. But it's an up-and-coming receiver that we've designed that is a standalone device, so we don't have to have a computer or a receiver along with it. Okay, that's all I wanted to say on that particular thing. There's that's some of the features of that receiver. It does do scanning. It scans up to 7 channels, and that you can put a lot of identification into it. If it doesn't receive a signal, then it'll switch to a slideshow of your choice. It'll go through the slideshow until it sees a signal. When it sees a signal, it'll switch onto the signal. So that's about all that I want to say for that. Okay, I've got more information about ATV. I do have some handouts, which is exactly what you see here. There's a limited number. If anybody wants a handout as long as they last, I got maybe 10 or 15 sheets here. It gives you a lot of the information for DATV and where to find some of this, some stuff. I've listed all the major websites. So it's a good resource so that when you want to study some of the stuff and look into it a little further, that it's available there. Okay. Are there any questions? Yes. I didn't know they did. Is there some, I'm not familiar with EchoStar. There's always DVBS, I believe. Okay. I'm totally unfamiliar with that. The ATSC 3.0 is a derivative of DVB-T. It's more complex than DVB-T. It's a variant of DVB-T, but it is not comparable to it. You can't. It's not compatible. You cannot use one for the other. I was originally, when they came out with that, I had hoped that it would be, that you could use DVB-T interchangeably in some form. No. Didn't work out that way.
The difference is DVB-T packaging of the video for DVB-T systems, and ATSC 3.0 uses regular internet packet protocol. So your input to your TV modulators is high-speed video. That's the biggest difference. And then there's a low-speed data stream for handheld devices that's superimposed over the high-speed modulation for your big TVs. That's pretty much. Was there any commonly used frequencies that you could get on details for people that send? Everybody's eyes on glass silvers.
The question is there commonly used frequencies for either 70 or 70 centimeters? I don't think there's any common frequency that's used. In general, it's the lower half of the band, 421 to 430 is used but it's pretty much up to everybody or whoever they set the repeaters up for. There's no standard. On 1200, it's basically area dependent. You got to stay away from the commercial stuff because there's some commercial radio telephone stuff that's in that, and you are secondary to that. So I've been a problem with some of the GLONASS stuff that showed up on ours, and we had to vacate. So it's whatever they decide to use. The Galileo system is going to take 1288 or related frequencies. So whenever it becomes a problem, we're going to have to move there too. There are some listings of the repeaters. The ATCO in Columbus was listed as the repeaters for television, but the latest issues that I know of, they deleted them all. I don't know why.
It used to be 434, at least in California, for analog, but 434 to 426, but that's been years ago, I don't know.
Mike, can you address that?
Yeah, no, I better, I get it to a microphone since it's recording. Yeah, basically, from the old analog days, you had 439 up and down? Up and down?
No, that's back and forth there.
Okay, got it. Okay, so what is Amateur TV Network? We're a network of ATV repeaters, and we do have chapters all across the country. We have one in Pitcairn Island and also one in Tasmania. This will be a presentation of the link repeaters in Arizona, Southern California, and Nevada. This is a picture of Mount Wilson. This is when we had the big fire that was burning up. And the location near the middle, you can see a big bright light over there. That's where I was at the KCAL building with the fire hoses out. Here's a location of some of our repeaters. And as I mentioned, the input frequencies on the top, and in this case, it's the Santiago Peak. We also have a microwave output at 5910 using FM, so for those of you with the new ICOM 905s, you can pick us up on 5910. And then you have the coverage map in the upper right-hand corner, which covers most of the Los Angeles, Orange County, and San Diego areas. There's a closer view of the coverage map and a view of the shack up on Santiago Peak. Another view, the amplifier in the middle with the meter, that's the 5910 25 watt amp. We got a 400 watt PA on 1253.25, which we will be going to digital soon. This is just a side view, and those cans over there is for a 220 command and control repeater. This is Oak Mountain, which covers more to the west, San Fernando Valley, Santa Clarita Valley, and parts of Ventura County, and this is the one that has the 919 output. It also has a microwave output at 3380. There's the coverage map for Oat. 8-foot link dish back to Santiago Peak. A view from the tower, there's the blue stick is the 919 transmit antenna. And then a view to the right's looking back up at the tower. And another view of the tower. And then there's me standing up next to the equipment rack at Oat. Another close-up view. Snow Peak, this is a site that's just slightly less than 8,000 feet. Same input system that everybody else is using. And this one we are using 4 megahertz bandwidth because we're having to protect ANSR4 radar at San Clemente Island well over 100 miles from the repeater. But their radar is up at around 1247, 3 megs bandwidth. When we ran the 6 megs, the top 600 kilohertz, our signal landed on them, so we reduced to 4 megahertz. We don't bother them, everybody's happy. There's a picture of the antenna farm. The blue stick is the 434, and then to the left of that's the white stick for 1242. Then we got a tower camera and then a 24 or 2.4 gigahertz receive antenna. And then they had fires a few years ago that was up at Snow Peak, and our camera up there was providing this to the fire department. And those aren't house lights, that's individual fires all over the hills. Here's the coverage for Snow Peak. It also covers down into the Palm Springs. And we have an interesting propagation because the Salton Sea is 200 feet below sea level, and in the middle of the path gives us an extended range of about 30, 40 miles further than you would have under northern curvatures. Here's the Mount Wilson frequencies, and same basic setup, and the coverage map for Mount Wilson. That's also where most of the TV stations are at. There's the coverage map for that site. Job's Peak, this is where the pictures, I don't have all those towers at my house, but the one to the right is the view looking north into the desert from the mountains from my tower. Close-up view, and that's my coverage map from my place. Another view of the map. Then we have a repeater in Santa Barbara. It's on the side of the hill. That's why the coverage is just down towards the ocean. And that's a 10-foot link dish with a 124-mile path back to Santiago Peak, skirting a Calabasas Peak is 4 feet blocking the path, but we run enough power to blast right through it. Let's see. There's a picture inside with the racks. There's a view looking down over Santa Barbara. This is a link site up at Ord Mountain. This is when we were constructing the 45-foot tower, and that provides a microwave link to Mount Potosi for Las Vegas. That ties to my house and my house back to Santiago. And there I am putting a 8-foot dish in for 5 gigahertz back to my house, and then the grid dish to the right is 1265 received from Potosi and transmit 2417 to Potosi. There's the picture of the site looking up at the tower. This is Arizona. This is kind of a zoomed in shot from White Tank, and that's Camelback Mountain. You've probably heard of that if you've ever gone to Phoenix. There's this frequencies, the same receiver lineup, which makes it nice for the repeater users. They just use their equipment, they can go to any site and their gear works. There's their coverage map for Phoenix. This is Mount Lemmon. We're getting into a different site building up there, but there's the coverage for the Tucson, Arizona area. There's their coverage map, covers about half of the state. There's the tower, some of the gear. That's a link dish that we had up, we were getting ready to put up. And this is kind of a link map, the green line showing Santiago Peak to my house, to Ord, to Potosi. And that's the end of that show. So, Art, if you want to get the other thing about the island, I'll ask questions. Say again? Whiskey Alpha 6 Sierra Victor Tango at gmail.com or WA6SVT at gmail. I do have some handouts that has some information too if any come see me.
Mike,
Yes.
do you happen to have that on a website we can log into?
Yeah, there's www.atn-tv.com should have that. If you look under membership and the membership application, you look down for Southern California, all my contact information's there. And then this is a real short little thing. Last summer, or I should back up, a couple winters ago, we had 8 feet of snow at Mount Wilson. I got trapped up there for 16 days, so then I went into time and a half after my shift. 24/7, ka-ching, ka-ching. So paid off a couple credit cards, paid down my wife's car. Where are we going to go on vacation? We haven't been any place special since 2010, so we decided to go to Tahiti. Talked to my friend Morella, VP6MW. She says, come visit us out there. So I said, hey, you want to go to a really wild place and do something even more exciting than just Tahiti by itself? And she goes, sure. So we went there. So this is Pitcairn Island. And I found out they didn't have a TV station, but they were getting ready to set one up, but ran out. They had the 4.5 meter satellite dish. They got it in, installed it themselves, but didn't know how to hook the gear up, had no transmitter. And I said, well, I'm a broadcast engineer. I'll come out and give you a hand. And I donated my time. I modified an ATV amplifier to work a little higher in the band with a different power module. And that's the same stuff we use for digital ham TV, so channel 25, station ZB TV was born on Pitcairn Island. Close up, and this is a panel antenna I rebuilt. And there's a VSWR 1.03 to 1. Pictured here with Jay Warren, and here's a panel antenna at ship's landing point. There's the spectrum picture, an area 8 megahertz bandwidth for using the New Zealand standard. Since they bought their TVs in New Zealand, we just adopted that standard. A little closer view. And this is the USGS, which is an American government radio that's in a vault up at Pitcairn Island. And the top 2 feet of the rack were available, so we put the TV station there. A little closer view. Output power is about 8.5 watts. I backed it off. The amplifier is capable of 10, but I'm not there to keep it going, so run it conservative. This is the thank you letter from the mayor of Pitcairn Island for the TV service, and we got permission to use ABC Australia's Pacific Island feed, so they're pretty happy about that, and it unclogs. They're not having to download as much Netflix videos, so now they can send their emails. And since then, now they got the Starlink system. Yep, that's it. Any questions? Yes. It's who you know. Some of those tower spaces are my towers. The one at my house, the one at Ord Mountain, Mount Wilson is where I worked. My employer was gracious enough to allow us on the tower. Santiago Peak, we've been there since '83, and back when it was a mom and pop owner, we did a lot of work for them, tower work and stuff like that. Now that it's one of the major tower corporations owns, as they do a lot of them, we've been grandfathered in. Again, we do work there. I mean, we keep the building painted, replaced drywall when they got a roof leak, and says, hey, don't spend thousands of dollars. We'll take care of it. Can we pay you? No. So stuff like that. So when you get a reputation, sometimes magic things happen. Any other questions? Yes.
PC Electronics, is that still?
No, Tom O'Hara retired several years ago. His website should still be up in case there's people with questions on the older equipment. Any other questions? Yes, Bill.
What happens if you sell your house on the Ord Mountain land?
Well, interesting thing. The real estate agent has told me that because I lease space, I'm a commercial site leaser. They said the house is worth about $60,000 more at that radio site there because it brings in hundreds of dollars a month and make the house more attractive. So I will work out a deal as long as the buyer wants that, and I can't think of any buyer who would not want $700 or $800 a month coming in on radio site rental to say, get that stuff out of here. Part of the deal is I'll be available for consulting, but I want to keep ATV stuff there. Anyway.
And how are you going to link Pitcairn Island into the ATN network?
IP video stream. Any last questions? Because I know we're out of time. All right, feel free to come to the ATV booth, and also, thank you. For those of you who've gone to Pitcairn, or would love to go to Pitcairn Island but thought you had to pay $18,000 or $20,000 through DXpedition, they do have homestays there. They are ham friendly. I do have some handouts if you're interested, so the average Joe can go and operate and get a VP6 call and have your own pile up, which I enjoyed last summer. So see me afterwards. Yes.
Yes, I've got some handouts right here for as long as they last. Thank you one and all for coming. I appreciate my stumbling a little bit. You guys caught me off guard here, and that I'll do the best I can. Whoops, is there two?
Except for me.
Oh.
Give her a copy first. Thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, appreciate it.
I was with Charlie Ergen in Eccleston.
Want a sheet here?
Oh, yes, please.
Here, I got some more, if anybody wants one.
I was with Charlie Ergen back in the early days of Eccleston. I was the one that wrote the Olympics.
Oh, okay.
And they were transmitting about 4 to 5 years before DVB was established on ATSC.
Okay.
But anyway, it's history. The great thing is now with all the new error correction software and digital memory is so cheap, you can do error correction quickly and cheaply.
Yes.
So you can have a moving car.
It's changed around quite a bit.
Yes. One of the reasons you can get the chips, the availability of DVB information, it's almost 1,000 to 1 market size.
Yeah.
And the test equipment also is almost all DVB. Same story.
A lot of test equipment's available now. It wasn't available just a few years ago.
Yes.
Yes. It's yours if you want it. No, I said it's yours if you want it. Anybody? You're welcome.
The VHF, UHF microwave form will be up next, so stand by. Or sit by. Thank you. The moderator, Tony, is not to be seen yet. I saw him earlier this, oh, okay, all ready. All ready, Tony, anytime you're ready.
Don't you no worry. Yeah, I worry
What's the furthest distance DX-wise are you from? Anybody from California? Out of the continents, out of the United States. Okay, very good. I was born and raised in California, in Los Angeles and all good stuff, in the military, and right pat.
President, vice president, secretary, and then 2 representatives from each of the regions. So in the past, years ago, spectrum was allocated principally, with the ITU and the national regulators. The decisions that were reached at the ITU came from conferences through negotiation, compromise, and then ultimately voting. To win spectrum, or to get spectrum allocated for you, a strong majority of the member states needed to vote in favor of it, obviously. And during that time, amateur radio made a lot of significant gains. Everyone, I think, is familiar with the new HF bands that were allocated for the amateur radio service in 1979. If you're not familiar with that process, you should be, because after 45 years, we still refer to them as WARC bands and not amateur radio bands. Pet peeve of mine. So, and then you have primary allocations and secondary allocations. So if you are allocated spectrum and you're not the primary user, you're a secondary user, you have to protect the primary user. You can't cause interference to whoever is the primary allocated user. But things are a lot different today, and this is what complicates the process and makes it really tough. The ITU today works by consensus. So out of those 193 member states, those countries, one country, if they want to be stubborn, can block a decision. And that's difficult. I don't know how many people we have in this room. It's not 193, but I'll bet if someone stood up and had a proposal to change something, probably one of you would disagree. So think about all of the geopolitical people you have to deal with around the world, and to try to get something done, it's really difficult. And here's a really key part today. The administrations in the country, even the FCC, and that's what drove the 3.4 gig reallocation, they see it as spectrum as a revenue source. And that can create billions of dollars for a government in a country. There's an emerging role now that we see develop with regional telecom organizations, and I've got a slide to talk about those. There are 6 that deal with areas around geographical areas of the world. So all of the government administrations within those areas really start working up through those regional telecom organizations. So it's a much harder environment, and we really hear a lot today about spectrum sharing. That's really a push that ITU is telling everyone, that you need to be able to share spectrum, because there just isn't anymore. So here are these regional telecom organizations. You have APT, which takes care of Asia Pacific, ASMG, the Arab states, ATU Africa, CEPT, CEPT in Europe. Y'all are probably familiar and heard of them. CETEL here in the Americas, and then the RCC, which is just a group of some of the independent states of the former Soviet Union. So achieving agreement is really started by national administrations developing proposals or draft positions that they want to see changed in the radio regulations. Those usually go up through the regional telecom organizations and then into these working parties that I mentioned, and then up to the World Radio Communications Conference. So at WRC 23, the issue that you heard a lot about and was our primary focus on 23 centimeters actually was an agenda item from WRC 19 in 2019. The French government which is a huge sponsor of the Galileo navigational system, Galileo had some interference from amateur radio. Now, it wasn't from any weak signal VHF work. It was not from EME work. It was from an ATV repeater that was running 24 hours a day with a test pattern or whatever. And some of the ground locations for the Galileo system were being interfered with. This got resolved after a long time, but that was a real issue. The Galileo folks wanted things resolved quicker when they had interference issues. So they had enough clout at WRC 19, they got this on the agenda. And it basically was to, that they acknowledged some amateur emissions are causing interference. They're not getting solved quickly. We need something to resolve those more quickly. But they did say they did not want to remove the amateur service from the 23 centimeter band. We are secondary there, so we had to protect this service. Now, I'll give you a little personal opinion here. They didn't want to remove the amateur radio service, but they would have been pretty darn happy if they could have achieved that, okay? You know, we print one thing, but that's really not our objective. So, the global positioning navigational satellite system worldwide consists of 6 systems. In the United States, we have the GPS system. In Russia, they have GLONASS. India has a regional navigational system. China has their own. And then the European Union has Galileo. It is comforting, it should be comforting to us as hams here in the United States that the United States government didn't really jump on this to try to push any kind of restrictions on amateur radio. Why? The GPS system was not being interfered with. This was strictly a European problem. But since radio signals don't have any boundaries, it became an international issue being pushed by the Galileo folks and the French government. So an interesting part here, this is the IARU team that was at WRC 23 that was held in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates this year. And a key thing I want to point out here is with the exception of Tim, Elam, myself, and Barry Lewis, who really led the workforce, this is Barry over here, all of those folks in that photo are radio amateurs. And they are actively, very active participants to defend the amateur radio service. But one of the problems that we struggle with in getting our point across at the ITU, we're not a voting member. We are a sector member of the ITU, but we don't have a vote. And in a lot of these working party meetings and at WRC, we can't even speak for or against a particular issue. Here's the exception. Every one of those people other than Tim, myself, and Barry were able to become members of their national delegation. And John Seiberling, right over here, works for ARL on the far right. John is a member of the United States delegation. As a member of a national delegation, you can stand up in all of these meetings and speak. Now, each delegation only has one vote, so to speak, but this allows us to be in these working parties, in these meetings at the WRC, and have people that can actually stand up and speak in support of amateur radio. That's a key point. So, the 23 centimeter issue, it took 4 years to reach a resolution on this. It began after WRC 19, when it was placed on the agenda, and all of these working party meetings, other meetings leading up to and during WRC 23 required a lot of work. I'm going to back up if I can. I want to highlight someone else here. I mentioned Barry Lewis, who was really our really key figure that led the work for getting this resolution. There's also a person here, second from the right. The white-haired gentleman in the front row is Dale Hughes, VK1, I'm going blank. What's this called him? Yeah, VK1 DSH. He's an Australian. Dale was able to be appointed as the chair of the sub-working group that dealt specifically with this issue. Now, even though he's a ham, he has to remain partial, and he needs to try to work through a very sticky situation. Dale's personality and the way he handles the meetings was so beneficial to the amateur radio service. If it hadn't been for his work and guidance, we would have never reached a resolution. So here is what was finally agreed at WRC about the 23 centimeter band. Basically, we have a footnote that will appear in the radio regulations, and you can read it for yourself, but basically, we still get to operate in the band. Right now, we don't have any restrictions. And if interference occurs, there's direction here for an administration to resolve it quickly. So basically, this was a win for us. Even though it's a compromise, there may still be some areas of the world, particularly in Europe maybe, where we see limitations placed on 23 centimeter operations. Right now, there aren't any. Those are still being debated within these regional telecoms. And here in the United States, Jay, fire up that big amplifier, okay? Let her rip. So there were some other matters at WRC as well. Probably for me, you know, we have space weather sensors, all of this stuff. This radar sounders at 40 to 50 megahertz is something that is a concern because it has impact on 6 meters. So going forward, we're keeping a good watch on that. For the upcoming WRC, these are some of the items that are on the agenda. You know, there's still some 23 centimeter stuff, space weather, lunar, a lot of things that impact the VHF and above spectrum. For WRC 31, in 8 years, the latest buzzword is WPT, wireless power transmission. And that's so you can drive your electric car over a charging unit and charge it up wirelessly. Well, that wasn't exactly my words. Mine were a little stronger than that, Bob, but that's probably had more to do with the other direction than Jesus. But, well, you know, this is stuff still in development, but it has an impact on the radio spectrum. And it's you know, it's the in thing right now, all of this electric cars and stuff and charging them. So, you know, I don't know how this is going to be developed. It's like 8 years down the road. So anyway, threats, this is my last slide. So, yeah, we're really lucky, all right, with our spectrum allocation above 144 megahertz, above 2 meters. We have 9% of the allocated spectrum there, either on a primary or a secondary basis. Well, that's pretty good. But that makes us a target for other services because you know right now that there are commercial services that want that spectrum badly. And again, here's this concept of spectrum sharing for primary allocations. And, you know, you start looking at things and, you know, what can we swap, maybe a primary allocation for something, and it's a chess game. So I hope this has been informative to you. I hope you can understand a little better how radio spectrum is allocated. And also, you know, I could talk the rest of the day about this and some of the things that go on behind the scenes. But bottom line is, we came out of WRC 23 with a potential to have a serious impact on the 23 centimeter band. That didn't happen. There may be some future restrictions to come forward. I don't have a crystal ball and can tell you whether any will come about in the United States or not, but for now, carry on. That's all I have, Tony.
Thank you, Joe.
Joel, thank you.
In the ARL area for the rest of the day, if anyone has any questions, want to stop by.
Let's see here, how do I? All right. I need, Russ, yeah. Our next speaker is K2 UA, Russ Healy. And let me, I'm going to need you to do your computer magic
sure,
here
sure.
while I talk for a second, okay, if you don't mind. Got to get out of that.
Can't log guys and work guys at the same time.
No, I don't have the ability that you have. By the way, how many people here operate on 10 gigahertz? Raise their hand. All right, just, yeah, a good portion. I'd like to publicly thank Russ for his work in the expanded results section. How many of you have seen that? It's very well detailed, very well written. It takes a lot of time. Hats off to Russ for volunteering to do that. What now, 4 years you've done? Yeah, 4 years. So the 10 gig community and above appreciates your efforts there.
Thank you.
Russ is an avid VHF, UHF microwave guy, well known in my neck of the woods on 47, 76 gigs and so forth, and also does a little bit of HF contesting as well. So as soon as we get the file on the screen, we'll be ready to rock and roll.
Switch keys here.
Oh, and while we're waiting, I don't think I announced Russ's topic. How many people here enter VHF and above contesting? And how many of you have been dinged by errors in either your log or someone you've worked log? Yeah, it's so Russ is going to speak to us about what we can do to kind of improve our scoring. Did you find it okay?
It's not reading the key. For some reason. The USB stick. Let's try a different. See if we have a different port here. It's always a physical layer problem. Yeah. There, that looks better.
All right, that's better.
Okay.
I'll give you that high sign. 5 minutes to go.
Perfect, thank you. We present it? Hey. All right, thank you, Tony. Hi, everybody. All right, I was looking at the computer. How many of you are on 10 gig and up? All right. I have another question related to, how many of you have entered an ARL VHF contest or UHF and microwave contest in the last year, let's say? All right, every hand goes up pretty much. And how many of those of you who have, how many of you have actually looked at your log checking reports, your LCR? Okay, less than half. That's okay. So there's some room for learning more about how you can improve. So what I want to do here is, let's see, I'll just advance this way, I guess. Does that move us forward? Yeah, okay. And next, make sure the other person has your information. I already told you that story. So keep that stuff from propagating. Real-time versus offline logging. I recommend logging in real time. And I like N1MM for this because it's, well, number one, it's free. It supports every contest. There are other loggers that other people like to use. One of the popular ones is N3FJP because it's really simple. It's not free, but it does have really good support for the ARL VHF UHF contests. The reason I recommend using a computer log is because you're not having to transpose or transcribe that log later from paper onto a computer, okay? So I realize that's not always practical, but be very careful when you're keying your log in. So this is probably, the tips on this page are probably where the biggest source of errors are, or sources. So good things to take away here. Oh, did I do that too fast for you? Did I move on? All right, sorry about that. I'll come back to it. Next, check your contest program setup. Make sure your category, power, location are correct. There's a bunch of things in there. Get your login before the deadline, and resist the temptation. This is really important, okay? Resist the temptation to share log information with other stations before the log deadline with the intent to fill in or correct log data before submitting. This is known as log washing, and it violates the intent of the competition. So a lot of people do this, think it's harmless, and I understand that. I'll leave it at that. You know, if you're competing for an award, you're really competing, it's you, right? You're the competitor. It's not a crowdsourced thing. Tony, 5, thank you. So resist that temptation. And that makes it more important for you to get it right in the competition, okay? After the log submission, go to the logs receive page for the sponsor, in this case the league. You know, they have a logs receive page for every contest. Make sure that you see your call sign on the list. Check your email and review the robot message. Make sure that, you know, look down through it and make sure that it actually accepted your log, because that's going to tell you that. If you find errors after the submission, again, go back and resubmit the log, fix them, and resubmit before the deadline. A courtesy tip here, post your score to 3830scores.com with a little write-up. Everybody likes to read what other people's experiences were like, and 3830scores.com is the place for that. So, you know, it's really interesting. That's where you get to add some color about your operation, and people really like that. After the results are published, make sure you go to the league's website, download your LCR, your log checking report, and it will have a detailed breakdown of all of the things that were removed from your score and why. For example, if I work somebody and they didn't log me, it'll tell me that. It'll show up as a nil or not in log, right? If I made a call sign copying error, or if I copied somebody's exchange incorrectly, it'll tell me that. And it'll tell me how many points I lost for each one of those things. It'll also tell me how many errors I caused in other people's logs and why. So for example, if I made a mistake like I was sending the incorrect exchange, or I was sending an exchange that doesn't match what I have in my log, it'll tell me that. That's really a bad error to make, by the way. I did that once. I was out portable in a location, I made a few contacts, and I was sending the correct grid, but when I submitted my log, I had put a typo. I had sent FN20, I put FN21 in my log instead of FN20, where I actually was in FN20. So all those people lost those contacts, and I felt like an absolute heel, which I guess is why my last name is Healy. Anyway, so I think we're pretty much there. Final comments. Pay attention to your details: category, location, sent grid, copied call and exchange. Make sure you're not propagating errors as you're typing in your log. Learn from your LCRs and always seek to improve, and watch your scores grow. I will point out that you'll see in the 10 gig contest results, I always talk about logging accuracy and statistics. Over the last 4 years, we've seen error rates consistently improve. And I would like to think that the fact that I'm talking about this stuff and the results is helping with that. I'm sure that some of it is just people are learning to use the tools. But I thought I would kind of touch on these topics for you to kind of help you with a few things to focus on, to help you improve your logging accuracy, and I hope you find this useful. We don't really have time for questions because of the short window here, but thanks for the opportunity to talk with you, and I'll be around afterward if you have any questions. Thanks.
Russ, thank you very much.
I'll get you going for the next one. Yep.
Thanks, Russ.
Thank you. Here we go. Hang on, I'll get it. Go ahead and get started.
Okay, our next speaker is JBack N1 AV, and some of you may know Jay, and he's the type of individual that when he sets his mind on something, you better stay out of his way. Whether it's hiking the 2,200 miles of the Appalachian Trail, or attending or achieving the Fred Fish Memorial Award, FFMA, in less than 1,500 days, or 1296 worked all states. Just my advice is he's driven. And so Jay's presentation today is going to be on his recent expedition to Hawaii, and then he's going to talk a little bit about the upcoming EME conference that's going to be held in the New Jersey area. All right, Jay, take it away.
Great. Thank you. I had to move the chairs because those of you who have seen me before, I move around a lot, and we didn't want to have a YouTube video of me falling over chairs in the middle of this presentation. My name is Jay, N1AV. I am not a mechanical engineer. I am not an electrical engineer. I'm not an RF engineer. I'm an educator. So what I bring to ham radio is passion. Magic smoke in radio exists. I try to keep it in the box. I have let it go many a times, and that's when I call up my really smart friends and say, how do I fix this? I don't know, but I like playing with it. I'm still enamored with the whole aspect of I send a signal somewhere, and somewhere else in the world hears it and sends something back to me that is super cool. I just love it. I don't get into the, well, according to the propagation data, you should look on page 16, will tell you the optimum time for this to happen. I don't care. I just send it, and if it works, great. And that's what makes radio fun for me. So, for the past 3 years, I've gone to Hawaii to do some EME. And the first year, I did 1296 and 902. The second year, I did 1296 and 902 again, but I actually brought a rotor this time, so that was smart, and that helped, because hand aiming a dish is somewhat difficult. And then I went again this third year. And this third year, I went with Paul, W2HRO, that many of you who are active now knows makes the fantastic folding dishes. Second disclaimer, I do not work for Paul. I receive no money from Paul, nor anyone else that I'm going to talk about. But I'm just a really happy customer, and I get the chance to go on expeditions with him. So that's super cool, because if you've got a folding dish that has 3D printed parts, who better than to bring the guy who made it when you go? So if there's a problem, Paul, fix that, and you're off and running. So 13 centimeters. Last year when I went, I was operating 1296. I worked Zdenek, OK1 DFC, and he said, hey, would you think about 13 centimeters next year? If you go, I'll give you the amplifier and LNA. You just bring the transverter and your equipment and your dish and you'll go. I'm like, well, you know you've made it when they're giving you stuff. So I'm like, hell yeah, all right. 10 months later, it shows up. 2 months before I'm getting ready to go to this trip. So we're a little bit frantic on preparation and whatnot. So what's the matter? Okay, spacebar, that works. All right. So, and it's not showing. I got it. I'm an educator. I can make this work. Maybe I can't. Where'd Russ go?
Should be the arrow up or down, Jay.
Yeah. It's just not displaying it.
Get on your phone and dial a kid.
Yeah, no kidding. We're just closing windows left and right here. Yeah? Yeah? We second, first, second, maybe? We're close? Look at that. Okay. Yeah. All right, cool. Look at that. Thank you very much. Round of applause. All right, so going to Hawaii. We brought 902, 1296, 2304, and 10 gig. We're not going to talk about that today because we're going to save that presentation for the EME conference in New Jersey later this fall. That was the first ever EME expedition on 10 gigs to Hawaii that made more than one QSO. But we'll talk about all that in Trenton. We'll have a few slides on it. So this year, 360 pounds of gear went on the plane with me to Hawaii. That's a lot of Pelican cases, that's a lot of wire, and it's a lot of duplicates. Because if you think about it, A transmitter doesn't weigh that much. Well, when you're going to Hawaii, you don't have your closet to go to when you smoke something. So it's 2 transmitters, 4 LNAs, 2 power supplies, 3 laptops. You're bringing all this stuff because if something breaks, you can't just run down the street and fix it. You got to have it because you're the DX, so you got to bring it. 360 pounds of gear. So I was lucky enough to push the cart with the dish, the big blue dish box, and my wife pushed the other cart where she could barely see over the top as she's pushing it through the airport. Last 2 years, we used the call N1V. I did it again this year. Made it easy to remember, especially early in the morning when our passes were. So weather is always an issue in Hawaii. We ended up going in March this year due to some vacation time that Paul's wife had related to her work schedule. So we had to deal with morning passes, which meant sunrise, moonrise, and in one day it was sun and moon together, only about 9 degrees apart. Not ideal. It also meant no visual moon. And anyone who has a folding dish knows being able to go, there it is really helpful to be able to see where the moon is. Didn't have that. We also had lots of rain and lots of wind. This picture of the dish on the right side of the screen is actually a video that I took a screenshot of. And if you're up close, you could see the water leaking out of the bottom of a dish like a fountain in Europe. That this was nothing more than a giant bowl collecting water. Pro tip, that doesn't work well with a folding dish. So, the last attempt on 13 centimeters was in 2007. That individual at that time had a 3-meter dish and about 200 watts. This year, I brought the folding dish, sub-liter patch feed, the OK1 amp, the DEM mini transverter, shout out to those guys, a Flex 6400, and several LNAs from KL6M and DEMI. The DEMI one's great because it has a bandpass filter put in. And of course, the assortment of stuff at the operating bench. That is the process of going from 902 to 2304 on the operating bench. That's about 3 Pelican cases worth of garbage that you have to wire in and make sure, okay, this power pole is yellow. That is not 13.8. That's 24 volt. Remember that. So I color code all that stuff because I don't want to release the magic. Thank you. Exactly. You want to keep it in the box. So 13 centimeters, for those of you that don't know, on EME is really unique because different countries have different frequency allocations. Let's just make this as hard as we can, right? Moon bounce by itself isn't hard enough. Let's play around with the frequencies. So the VKs are down around 2300. We're around 2304. Europe is at 2304 and 2320. And the JAs are at 2400. Sure. Okay. For this trip, I basically said, how am I going to make this work? Especially working Europe, because that was a primary focus. Since the OK1 guys actually sent the stuff to me, I kind of want to make sure I work them. So Europe was a big deal. So how do I transmit at 2304, take into account Doppler shift, and at the same time listen at 2320, taking into account Doppler shift? And then transmit back on 2304 when they're transmitting on 2320. So all this is swirling around in my head. How am I going to make this all work? So the solution was the Flex. And I don't work for Flex. But Flex's flexibility allowed me to adjust the IF frequency so I can listen to different parts of the band with one radio. So it's really neat. The only frequency I was not able to cover was 2400, which were the JAs. But typically in this expedition to Hawaii, I have a 6,000-foot mountain range behind me, which blocks me from working the JAs anyway. So they were out for 2400. Maybe in a future event, I might change that. So my solution to make this work of transmit and receive digital on 2304, but listen on 2320, and if I hear anything on 2320, send that back on 2304, was how can I, 2 laptops. So, okay, so we'll have 2 separate laptops, and then I'm going to put a splitter in there, a receive splitter, on my receive line, and I'm going to run a Flex 6400 over here with my transverter, and then I'm going to have a Flex 1500 over here, and if any one of you are still selling one, let's talk after
after this meeting. A Flex 15 over here with another laptop. So I had a Flex 1500 with a laptop just receiving on 2320, Flex 6400 with a laptop on 2304. So I'm up and down, transmit and receive here. I'm just listening at 2320. The problem becomes then, as many of you know, FT8, Q65, it pops up and you go click, click, and you work that station. If I'm looking at this laptop, there's no click, click because we're over here. So I see OK1 DFC pop up. Now I've got to retype all of his stuff in a 7-second window between transmit and receive to get it all in there to start the next sequence so I do it on time. So I'm frantically, constantly going back and forth and entering material manually, which to some people, running one laptop is hard enough. Now run two when you're in Hawaii, and most of your time when you're not on the moon is spent with adult beverages. So, you know, there's a lot going on to pay attention to. Since this trip, N0AKC, Charlie has come up with a much more elegant solution. And he actually posted this on the 13-centimeter EME I/O group. I wish I had talked to him about this before I went, but that's the solution I came up with. So my 2 laptops that I had to bring became 3, because now I had to play with 2 during the same time to work 13 sems. So who did I end up working? I worked about a dozen people in total. First pass was 0 wind and bright sunshine. I worked a couple of guys right out of the gate. Of course, the OK1 guys, go figure. Worked those guys first thing, and I'm feeling real good about myself. And then we have a wind gust, and the dish goes, thank you. It's completely off the moon. So then I'm frantic trying to get back on the moon and work these guys. Anyone who knows with a folding dish, it's really hard to aim. So signals dropped, and it became much harder to work. Then we had the rain, like you saw on the dish, pouring through, problem. Second day, windy, but not raining, and I ended up working a few more. So some conclusions. The folding dish on 2304 works. Paul's sublunar dish. I was the first person to actually complete a 13-centimeter QSO with his dish. It does work if it's not windy and if it's not raining hard. Light sprinkles are okay. Heavy rain, we discovered, deforms the dish. It starts to sag, so you lose receive. And then you're just blanking into the wind. Insert the phrase of your choice at that point. 2304 can be really loud. It's cool. I am going to be going back to KH6. We're going to go back in 2026, and we're going to bring, because my last name's back. Someone's paying attention. There we go. Thanks, Russ. So I will be bringing 2304, 5 gig, and 10 gig in 2026. So the last 3 minutes, we're going to burn through these. How many of you know about the International EME Conference? A few. How many know the last time it was here? Without looking at the slide. 12 years ago, last time it was on US soil. This is a big deal. This conference rolls around Europe a lot. The who's who of EME are at this conference. So the person you've worked and you get their card and it's like, this dude's got 16 antennas and what's that, 5,000 watts? They're most likely going to be at this conference. It is a must-go if you're interested in EME. If you're interested, you're active, you want to be active, come to this. It's in New Jersey. It's easy to get to. There's going to be plenty of time to chat, socialize, plenty of talks. Well, easier than Prague. Yeah. We are also, for the first time, offering a EME 101 course. So it's an intro course. So if you're thinking about getting on EME or you just started, we're going to have all these people who are attending teaching these courses, from how to set up a transverter, what's our, the right gain settings, how to use a sequencer, why you should be horizontal versus vertical, yada, 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 yada. Soup to nuts. 8 classes worth of information. EME 101. The link is there. The EME 2024 Trenton is the website. It's really something that people should think about doing and attending this conference. So when is it? It's in August. August 9th through the 11th, this August. I say we a lot because I'm on the planning committee, so if you have questions about that, please come talk to me after this session, and we can talk about it. It's at the College of New Jersey and the hotel right next door. It's going to be a good time. It really is. I mean, just to be able to meet some of the people you've worked for years, or you've watched work all these people, or win different competitions when it comes to EME, to be able to sit and chat with these people.
Now, if you sign this stuff, make sure you sign back out once you, before you leave, right? I can grab that in just a second for you.
Here. Now loosen that up for me just a little bit. Okay, that's good. Tighten that up somewhere and I'll fiddle with it. Yeah. Well, just, yeah, anywhere, just tighten it up there so it'll stay. And on the screen, we're seeing all this on-off switch here. No, on the screen we're seeing all the space, right?
We are seeing the Word document. Yep.
Yeah. So how do I make this bigger on here?
What would you like to see instead?
I like to make it just bigger.
Bigger? So if you click right here, you can zoom in. Oh, no.
No, I can do control.
Yep,
plus.
you can do that too.
Well, maybe I can. Control.
Maybe not.
Usually, maybe down here. There we go. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. Yeah, close enough. Okay. Okay, good morning, good afternoon. So, does anybody here have like a blank sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper or something like that we could pass around so I can, because what I'd like to do is get everybody's call sign and email address, because everybody that's here is going to get a big document with, it's a couple hundred pages of a PDF file with interactive links and videos and all kinds of other stuff that I couldn't.
I have about yellow.
Yellow, yellow's great, yeah, yeah.
Set it up, what do you want me to put it on?
Yeah, if you just bring it up and stick it over at one, give it to somebody at one corner and let them start passing it around. This is about a 6-hour-long presentation. You probably didn't notice that in the schedule, because there's no way to get a 6-hour-long presentation. But I have done the presentation. Great, great. Okay. No, that's good. I have done the presentation, and it takes about 6 hours, and I did cut it down from 8, but it's still lengthy. So what I've done is I've taken the sort of the 30,000-foot view, but to be really useful to you guys, What you want is the ground level view. And when you come down to the ground level view, there's a whole lot more stuff there. So I'm going to give you kind of the flavor of what to expect. And then I'm going to send you, when I finish typing, revising, and validating every single link, and there's about maybe 10,000 links in there now, validating all the links, so that's about June, July, probably around August time frame, you will get this in an email message, assuming that I get your call and your email here. Well, I'm just a klutz today. I had a clipboard, but I left the clipboard back at the QCWA booth. I'm from the QCWA, by the way, Quarter Century Wireless Association. I'm the president of that, back in booth 5310. You haven't got a clipboard, have you, Logan?
Nope.
No, okay.
I'm all digital.
You're digital, yeah. I'm pretty much all digital too. So, but I left a lot of stuff behind there. Oh, here we go. Oh, that'll work great. Yeah, there's a. Well, I'll tell you. Hams are the most innovative people and problem-solving people in the world, in case you're not aware of that. So we're in good shape here. Okay, so let's start this over on that side, and we'll just let people pass it across, and just get, all I need is your call sign so I can read it, and an email address so I can read it. I don't need to know any other information about you. If you're a QCWA member and you want to write that down, QCWA, that's fine, but you don't have to be, because this is, other than the fact that I'm from QCWA, this is not a QCWA recruiting kind of thing whatsoever. We've done those before, and we get about 10 people, and mostly they want to know, well, why didn't my cousin Joey get a scholarship? And we give away a few dozen scholarships every year, college scholarships to people, and as well as grants to other organizations and clubs. This year we gave away grants to ARIS and AMSAT and RCA Youth Program and some other things. And we give away grants to individual clubs and stuff like that as well. So we're going to talk about integrating the internet and ham radio, which everybody knows all about, so this should go pretty quickly here. I've broken it down into 3 categories: information, engagement, and operation. Unlike yet another hierarchical organizer, which is what Yoo-Hoo was, I've broken it down into a functional assessment. So, under information, we have static and dynamic information. Static, obviously, is things that don't change very much. That would include things like maps of countries, geographical projections, topological, prefixes, CQ zones, ITU regions. Of all those things, prefixes probably change the most, and they don't change on a regular basis. Like the prefix this week is probably going to be the prefix next week. And the CQ zones and ITU regions and the physiological map stuff doesn't change too much, except things like when Yugoslavia was a country, which some of you probably worked. I did. And then Yugoslavia is now multiple countries, which we work independently. And there's some historical data that doesn't change very rarely. On ARRL, you have the QST archive, plus you have QEX, NCJ, and on the Air magazine. And on the QCWA website for members, There's about 25,000 plus pages of exclusive historical data that goes back. Everything QCWA has ever done that's accessible still, it didn't get lost to posterity since 1947, like 76 years ago when we started, has been archived and stored. Most of it is in searchable PDF files, as is the stuff on old QSTs. I still have some of my 1910s and 20s era kind of QST magazines for sentimental value, but you can go on ARRL's website and find that information if you have any reason or want or desire to. Everything on the QCWA website's in PDF files, so it's really easy to find. We're not too worried if you find it and want to share it to your neighbor. ARRL is a little more sensitive about stuff. But I have gone back and found things in QST archives, like where I was mentioned one time winning a novice contest, things like that. And I found things on building certain kinds of antennas that I know I saw somewhere and wanted to get the particulars and details on. So there is a lot of historical data. There is some information that's dynamic that change frequently. That would include call signs, like on QRZ, or ham call CD and online updates to it. And of course, podcasts, video blogs, or V-blogs, and regular blogs, where people update them weekly, daily, monthly, periodically, depending on how they do it. And weather, atmospheric conditions, solar conditions, those change sometimes by the minute, sometimes by the hour. So there's a lot of stuff that's informational for us, but it changes. There are a lot of forums with information in them, some good, some not as useful. On QRZ, on EHAM, and hundreds of other groups.io kind of forums. I find that you kind of have to take all that with sort of a grain of salt, because not everybody is right about everything. And even though what they say may be technically accurate, it might not fit your particular situation. And of course, there's equipment sales. QRZ does some vetting. They've been working really hard on making sure that what they have for sale is really for sale and viable and all that. Next to impossible to return anything to anybody now because of part swapping. People have a 1 or 2 year old radio and they order something and it comes in and they take the working board out of that radio and put the defective board from their radio in and say they want to return it because it doesn't work, and create some problems. There's personal experiences, there's been less of that with QRZ than with other sources, but your mileage is going to vary. EHAM has used stuff, Larry's List has used stuff. Larry, of course, passed away just a couple of months ago, for those that don't know. If you don't know what Larry's List is, well, you'll be getting the documents with the links for that. eBay is sort of buyer be very wary, because it's sort of anybody's guess. eBay does have policies that if you get something that's defective, you can return it. There was a lot of caveats on that, and they let people get away with a lot. ARRL has things that change. They have really good news, current events, some really excellent technical topics, some really good product reviews. Some of them are a little technical, but they're very good information, especially from a comparison standpoint, as do places like Sherwood Engineering. Really excellent information that changes. QCWA has a full-color monthly digital journal and an easy-to-use PDF file. YouTube is just full of stuff. I mean, you can find YouTube videos on just about every possible topic, not just amateur radio, but, you know, how to replace the temperature sensor on your 2006 Toyota Avalon, where it's located, which way to turn it, what to be careful of, all kinds of stuff. One site in particular that really stands out, and you'll be getting all of this in the files, Kilo 8 Zulu Tango, probably the best site of useful links that's online. Dozens of pages of links that are checked and rechecked and accurate and really good usable stuff. He's a local guy here in Ohio, and has just done an outstanding job with what he's done there. Yeah, beyond information, we come to engagement. Engagement are things you would use to improve your operating experience. You can still operate, get on your radio like we used to, and just call CQ without any of this information. But there are some things that might improve your operating experience, like log books. N3FJP has got a specialty log, like for field day, which is definitely the widest used log for field day there is, and a lot more specialty logs for various contests and all. If there is a particular thing you need a log for your group or organization, if you talk to him, he will customize something for you, most likely. And of course, they have a AC log, AC amateur contact log, an AC log, a very good general logging program with a lot of extra fields. So you can actually get pretty much all the data there is in a log book. N1MM is a very fast log, fast to use, very little to put into it. You don't get as much out of it, but it's very easy to put in, and you get the basics you need to make the QSL, get confirmation, get credit. Ham Radio Deluxe, really nice log book, a lot of features in their log book. It's a lot more than just a logging program, because it's a rig control program and a satellite tracking program and you know, a bunch of other things there. QRZ has a log book, and a lot of people like to use that because it's easy for people to see. And if you're involved in any kind of contesting or events, there's a good chance you're going to use this thing called Club Log. Club Log is a place where you upload your scores, and other club members can upload their scores, and you can get a total score for how many members in your club, you know, achieved a certain thing. And of course, Polo, if you do Parks on the Air, how many people in here have done Parks on the Air? A lot of hands, yep. That was kind of pushed by my, my former club secretary, who was ARRL CEO, Tom Gallagher, and trying to get that going following the initial Parks on the Air contest. Polo was a Parks on the Air log book that works on your cell phone, and is a pretty nice little product. There's things you use to improve your operating experience still. Things like if you're going to looking for de-expeditions, there are sites that specifically focus on de-expeditions, sites that focus specifically on contests like the A7B&M contest calendar. Lists all the contests pretty much there are. And of course, Parks on the Air, which is wildly popular now, probably the most popular operating event activity. And of course, you can also, with HRT, it'll support RIDI, it will support CW, and all under the same PSK31 format. FL-Digi does a similar kind of thing with other optional features. FL-Digi is really good if you want to send traffic, like send FEMA ICS messages and stuff like that. You can have those formatted and send those using FL-Digi. Many programs let you do keyboard to radio CW work. Just type in the CW in your keyboard, and we'll let you see CW on the screen or decode the CW on your screen, either your computer screen or in some cases on your radio screen, depending on the radio you have. And I know people that have won small contests, being the only person from, say, Tennessee that operated on, in this particular contest, a European contest doing CW, and they get a nice certificate that says #1 U.S. station in the contest for CW, and they don't even know CW. So it's a little iffy there, but I mean they're making the effort to do it the hard way. To me, the hard way with the keyboard and the screen, you know, the decoding stuff. The most exciting thing to do, to me, with using the ham radio and internet is remote operation. That's where you're in one place and you're going to use a radio and transmitter and antennas in another place to make your contact. There's a number of reasons why you might want to do this. You might live in an HOA area. You might live in an area that without an HOA, but you don't have a lot big enough to put up a 100 or 200-foot tower, or you simply can't afford to put up a 200-foot tower with 3 or 4 stacked Yagis on it for 20 meters, and so it's a little hard to do that. Or maybe you can't afford an HF radio. Maybe you have friends that cannot afford an HF radio. Maybe you have friends that are retired and older. Not that we have a lot of us that are really young. I'm 80, and I still consider myself, I don't consider myself old yet. My son does, he's 10. He thinks I'm old, but I don't consider myself there. But I have friends that are 80 or less who are in assisted living facilities and stuff like that, and they can't have external real equipment. But what they can have is they can have a computer or a laptop, and they can connect to an external station. One of those is this remotehams.com here. Remotehams.com is free. It has a limited rig control interface. It gives you a sort of a crude replica of a radio that you can use to connect to generic radios with. These you don't have to. You do not have really full rig controls. You're using donated time and space in another ham system. Most are 100 watts with wire antennas. Some couple hundred watts, and some have a small beam. Very few of them let you control the beam. And even if they have amplifiers, almost none of them let you use their amplifiers or stuff. But it does let you get on the air without having all that facility and equipment and stuff to do, and make good old HF contacts. So it's a good way for those with no HF accessibility to do it. Another way to do this, and I have friends that have done this, is to build your own remote. This is a rather expensive and complicated issue. You need 2 sites, home and remote, which means you probably need a big site to be your home, and you need an acre or more of land to be your remote station and put up a tower and so forth. Or if most of the people that do this put up towers. You don't have to, but you could. Most of them do. You probably want a tower and beams and long wires for the low bands. It's harder to control AC and DC power. There's advanced tuners, antenna switching, antenna isolation, amplifiers, internet, etc. to connect to it. It's a lot of work. It's actually easier to do it a different way. But if you have the means of doing this, it can give you a really nice exclusive operation. I have a friend in Florida and another, well, two friends in Florida, one of whom also had a place out in Colorado. And they live in condos, so in a condo, which is a rented apartment, you know, or a purchased apartment, basically, in a condo, you really can't put up a tower and a beam and stuff like that, except in really rare cases. So what they did is they bought about 30 miles away from one of their QTHs, they bought a piece of property, built a building on it to house their equipment, poured a pad, put up a tower, put up some beams, got AC power in and got internet connection in from a cable company. And so they have a, you know, a completely remote station. They have there's a lot of relays and switches and things like that involved in turning the power on and off and resetting stuff. And of course, there's a PC there, turning the PC on and off and resetting that. It's only about half an hour away from one of them, so he can go there and make adjustments if he has to. But in general, they don't. Generally, you go with what you got there. It's a big learning curve, because just when you think you got things working, you find there's stuff, oh, we have to have a way to turn the amplifier on or off. We have to have a way to not have antenna A interfere with antenna B that are 20 feet apart if both of them are running 1,500 watts, you know? So we have to set the rotors up so this antenna will focus in one direction, the other antenna focuses in a different direction, you know, and it's a lot of little complicated things to set up. My preference for those kind of things, and I've used this and extraordinarily successfully, is using what I would call world-class remote stations. And that pretty much boils down to remotehamradio.com or RHR. And let's see if we can switch the video over to that. So we want to switch to this system down here. Yeah. That on the screen? No, okay. Logan, we're not seeing this on. His mom has no idea what he's sending or saying. You know, so anyhow, so if somebody can pass up, give me that sheet of paper where you all signed up, I'm going to send you, good, it's up here, okay, great. I'm going to send everybody a big PDF file with a lot of detail on this information in it, about all the other links, all the things to go to, literally thousands of links and websites and places to get information on all kinds of aspects of amateur radio, and some interactive videos of making contacts on remote ham radio and on remote hams, which is free. And remote hams isn't bad. It's a good way to get some activity. But you know, when you really need something, this is the way to get that something. I never would have worked Swain Island without something like, you know, remote ham radio here. And it's really, you know, the cat's meow, the state of the art of what they're doing. and the people are just super nice. It's not like, you know, I mean, they're making money doing this, but they're not in it just for the money. To give you a comparison, when they first started doing this about maybe a dozen years ago, to get an annual membership was $5,000. Now an annual membership is $99. It used to be, it was almost $5 a minute. Now it's $1.25 a minute for the best stations. So they're very, very, very good people to work with. And they realize people aren't going to do this and just do this and nothing else. This is a supplement. This is one way to make operating what you do fun again, get some of the challenging things that you can do, feel good about it, okay? Any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you, when you go on the website, do you sign up for a time slot and amount of time or what?
No, you sign up for, you're either $20 a month or you're $99 a year, and then you go to the stations you want and look for when there's an opening time. It would be unusual for you to have to wait more than 20 or 30 minutes to get in, because people are not sitting there, just sitting there doing nothing else for hours at a time, because there's a cost involved, and they're not just spending the money for the cost. They're spending the money efficiently, wisely. They're there to get something specific and do it. You wouldn't want to do this for field day. You wouldn't want to do this probably for the CW sweepstakes, although maybe, but probably not. It's a purpose-built kind of thing. And I've never spent more than 10 minutes waiting for a slot to get on, because they don't just have one, they don't just have one station there, one radio there. They have usually multiple towers, multiple radios, so there's multiple accessibility there, you know? And so it's really, they've got, I don't know, $50 million, $100 million. They got a lot of money invested in this. Their main business is installing towers. They're a tower company. They go in and put in towers. They put towers in for other hams. They put towers in for commercial uses, like the one I mentioned in Haiti. They do towers, and they get paid well to do towers, and they're really, really good at doing towers. And their hams, they've been in, the World Radio Team Sport representing the U.S., stuff like that. So they're quite accomplished as far as hams go. But the tower business is their main business. But the ham radio thing is their passion. So kind of like for most of us probably had another business. Our business wasn't selling ham radios or designing ham radios or something like that. It's our hobby, it's our passion, but we did something else for a livelihood. They still do. They're a lot younger than me. They still do something else for a livelihood. That's putting up towers and putting up custom radio installations and stuff all over the world, mostly in the U.S. But they put things up in Italy and in Europe and in South America and in Haiti and all kinds of places. Ray just came back from, I think he just came back from Alaska putting something up. I don't think it was a ham station. But the ham radio thing is it's what they do for fun. And they share their fun with other people. So, any other questions? Yes?
Forgive me for being late. Are these stations considered under automatic control or remote control?
They're remote control. You have to be there and you have to operate it. You're there and you connect to it via your internet browser.
Next question
yeah.
is, am I the control operator?
Yes.
Or the owner of the station?
No, you're the control operator.
Okay, so I use
Use your call. You use your call, not the station's call. I presume the stations have calls, but I have no idea what they are because you use your call. Yep, yep. Yes.
DXCC, I mean, how do they, you can be anywhere in the world.
For DXCC, you can be anywhere in the United States, and it counts for DXCC. They talked about making DXCC be limited to 200 miles of your QTH, and that was brought up, and that got shot down almost as fast as it came up, because they figured out that none of the ARRL Board of Directors would have DXCC if they had to do it all from within 200 miles of their home, because they've moved around, they've traveled. I've been, you know, I mean, I was in New York at one time, in Pennsylvania, I've been in New Mexico, I've been in South Florida, I got a place now in like West Central Florida. You know, during our lifetime, most of us move. We're kind of nomadic now compared to the way we were 50 or 75 years ago. So, but DXCC still is in the U.S. and territories like Guam and Puerto Rico, and then. And I guess the base in Antarctica would probably count as DXCC if you were in Antarctica that long, but I don't think anybody's down there at McMurdo Station that long of a time. So I just had a relative come back from there, and he was there like 6 weeks, which was a long tour of duty for him. So yes.
I'm operating a station in a foreign country, then do I need a reciprocating license?
Yes, if you operate a station in a foreign country, you're going to need the license for that country, maybe some other paperwork and all that. Yeah, they do not, this particular operation does not have stations you can operate in another country. Their stations are all in the U.S. Yeah, they have stations they've built in other countries, because they're a tower building company and antennas installation company and stuff like that, but they're not stations for U.S. hams to operate. At one time, they had some stations for U.S. hams to operate, like in Italy, and that created more trouble than it was worth, you know, because of reciprocating and all this other stuff, and it doesn't count for DXCC, and there's just, you know, so it's all U.S. based that way now. Yeah. Make sure there's a sheet up here to sign in. So if you sign in with your call and your email, you're going to get I'd say roughly time frame sometime in August, about a 200-page PDF file that goes through thousands of links to ham radio related topics and things that are verified and useful and accurate and all that kind of stuff. Very, very good information, okay? All right, thank you very much. Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Rather than this long process here, how come you just don't give us the link and we can download it at our leisure, or is that something you'd rather not do?
Because I don't have it ready yet.
Oh,
I'm still revising it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Are you gonna like draw for the prize later on and just notify people?
Yes, off the list of people that signed up, I will draw for the prize
Enjoyed
and
it,
notify
man.
them.
You need to write a spider to crawl the web. I mean, there's like thousands of them.
There are. I've narrowed down out of probably. Yeah, you've been there. Yeah. Okay.
Your papers, sir? Your papers?
Oh, great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, let me try to get out of all your way here.
put them all in there. We're going to draw for two and put them all in there. We're going to draw for 2 of my current Arduino for ham radio books and 2 of my future books, which will be out in about 2 weeks. And so we're going to have that drawing. I'm going to start over here and ask everybody to take one, fill it out, and pass it on down. Hopefully your neighbor will have a pen you can borrow. If not, you lose. And yeah, here, we'll pass around the bag with it, and everybody just throw your ticket in the bag as you go. X's do not count. And while we're doing this, we're going to go ahead and get started. Who am I? Besides being crazy, I am KW5GP. I am now a retired network engineer and technology consultant based in Memphis, Tennessee. I was first licensed as WN4FTX back in 1973. I'm the author of ARRL's Arduino for Ham Radio series, Elector's Arduino for Radio Amateur Applications book that just came out, QST articles, and product reviews. I also show world champion Maine Coon cats. As you can see here, this is Godzilla. Oh no, it gets better. She is indeed a world champion Maine Coon show cat. And as you can see, she's definitely a handful. And those of you that know me have seen me on W5KUB.com. This is my current pair. Of course, this is why it takes me forever to build a project. I have to find a way to get the enclosure out from underneath Godzilla, and then I have to pay rental fees to use the soldering iron. And if you want those wire clippers, they come extra. But she definitely, you have to work around them. Believe it or not, they have never been burned by the soldering iron. And, but they are definitely underfoot. But just like anything else, there's more. We got a new one. This is Sasquatch. He is a 4-year-old Maine Coon boy. And remember seeing Godzilla in the first picture? He's a 1/3 bigger than she is. And he's only 4 years old. Maine Coons grow up until 5 years. But we can't tell him he's adopted. And did I say they're huge? In this screen, this is a 42-inch TV to give you context. And he's still got another year growing to go. But that being said, you're not here to see the cats. You're probably dog people too. But today, I am going to answer that one big question we've had in life. No, it is not 42. We're going to prove that wrong today. Those of you that have been coming and seeing my seminars for years, I've been saying, you know, you ask me what to do, what I can build, what to do after I get this thing. And I have been answering typically, think of a project and go build it. It's that easy. And yes, it really is. But that's not a fair answer to those of you that really are trying to learn. And so, with the demise of places like Radio Shack and STEM and electronics classes and schools and universities, I mean, where can you find this knowledge? You know, it's really not out there. So this presents a really big hurdle to you, those of you wanting to learn how to do the microcontroller thing. So where do you acquire these skills? The hint, we're going to find them in amateur radio. What parts and tools do we need to get started with this? There's not very much in the way of starter kits and things for the Arduino out there unless you go it alone. But don't be afraid. Along with learning the microcontrollers themselves, it will help you to learn some basic electronics. Go to sparkfun.com, adafruit.com, and others. The ARRL handbook is a great place to learn some basic electronics. Once you understand the basic roles of these various components, then you can learn how to combine them to create your own microcontroller projects. And don't be afraid of wiring something wrong. Smoke is part of the process. It really is. If you're not blowing something up, you're not pushing the limits. This is why the parts are cheap, okay? We're not afraid to throw it, you know. The parts in my bins, whenever I blow up a part, you can literally see the big ones push the little ones to the front, say, take him next. You know, but the thing is, they're inexpensive parts. You're not killing yourself. You're not hurting anything. So don't be afraid to make a mistake. And a lot of these components are very forgiving. So even if they're not, they're inexpensive. So you haven't hurt anything. And grow as you go. I recommend starting out with the Arduino Uno or Nano. Buy some basic components, but don't go overboard. And we'll show you some methods there. A basic component assortment goes a long way towards building products. You will actually find that when I'm building things, I use almost the same parts over and over and over again. The same value resistors and capacitors. So a basic component assortment will go a long way. You can get these from eBay, AliExpress, Banggood.com, just about anywhere. If you want to spend more money, you can go to Jameco or DigiKey, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And that's basically parts is parts. It doesn't matter where you get them. We're not playing with mil-spec, top-of-the-line stuff. When it comes to our projects, the parts really are pretty much all the same. So it doesn't matter where you get them. We're hams. Do you want to spend a little or do you want to spend a lot on your parts? I'm cheap. You know, I go to AliExpress and wait a few weeks for my parts to come in. I get a bag full of resistors for 25 cents. But eBay, Banggood, AliExpress, I've been getting parts for them for years and really haven't had much in the way of problems. Next thing, learn how to solder. Yeah, if it smells like barbecue, you have done something wrong. But ask your fellow hams, your club, to run seminars on how to solder. It's not that hard. Some ham fests, such as the Orlando Ham Fest, actually have seminars on learning how to solder. And Joe Eisenberg did a forum yesterday. You can always catch his forum on kit building, and he can point you in that direction as well. And for your test equipment, as with any hobby, you can either spend a little or spend a lot on our tools and test equipment. It's the same way with our radios, isn't it? We said we just bought a $200 radio. We usually have to add a zero to that price tag, but we don't tell anybody. But you don't need the best of everything to build your basic microcontroller projects. In fact, you don't really even need everything. A voltmeter will cover just about everything you need to do. And as your skills progress, just like with the radios, you're learning more stuff. You know, you need that digital SWR meter, that automatic tuner, and oh yeah, that Ameritron amp. Gonna have to do it. But to get started, you need that. But in addition to a standard multimeter, there are a few tools that at some point you're really going to want to have. You'll want a good temperature-controlled station. The one that's shown here is like $50 on AliExpress. And get one that has a hot air gun. You'll need this if you ever want to solder surface mount components. Or if you're going to heat shrink, they're wonderful for doing heat shrink. I don't do surface mount soldering. The last time I did surface mounts, I think the fire department asked me to stop. But get you a component tester. These are like 10 bucks, and they will test the component, tell you what value it is, even give you some parameters about it. This way, you don't have to read the capacitor color codes, or the numbering and the resistor color codes. When they went to that 5-band resistor code, I just gave up. I just said, no, stick it in the component tester, and off you go. It will even help you identify semiconductor components and even those unknown parts that you find out at Hamfest flea markets. You can test and it'll tell you what it is. These are about 10 bucks. You can find them online. A lot of Hamfests have them. I haven't seen any. And as you notice, mine comes with the cat's claw security option. Nobody's stolen it yet. I found body parts everywhere, but nobody's made it out with it. You'll want an oscilloscope. While you don't really need an oscilloscope to build and troubleshoot your projects, they really do make life easier at times, and eventually you'll probably want one. There is a group here, Unity, that had some really good scopes, and they're very well priced. They're like $200 a piece, and they're not really that expensive. Amazon's got a 2-channel digital storage scope for 180 bucks. And you can also find the inexpensive older style scopes in the flea markets here. I mean, they're all over the place here. So you can get a scope. Another thing that you want is a logic analyzer. Think of this as a scope for digital signals only. This will show you the signals, the timing relationship between all the various digital signals. Since you've got like 16 IOs on your Arduino, you're going to sometimes want to see the relationships between all these timing problems. A typical logic analyzer will show you 16 channels simultaneously on a PC that connects over the USB. They're only like 45 bucks. And this is what I'm talking about. You can actually look and see all of the signal relationships on the pins if you're trying to do some timing. Now with development systems, usually you'll start with breadboard and jumpers and whatnot. Those of you that have worked with breadboard and jumpers realize that those wires come loose and you end up with a really big mess over time. For me, once I moved off of the breadboard, I discovered this FazeDock workbench product. They're actually here in building 4, booth 4008, 4208. And Chris, are you here? Yeah. Chris is the owner of FazeDock, and he's got some good stuff back there, and we'll be talking more about his stuff in a little bit. But the workbench shown here is what I call a breadboarding system on steroids. It uses a interchangeable component platforms known as clicks and slides, and you can customize it to suit your prototyping needs. For example, when I was doing one of my books, what you're seeing here is actually the prototype of the AR controller. That whole thing will simulate an AR40 and I built it on the FazeDock there. I reviewed this in the April 2020 issue of QST, and Chris has them back there at their booth. Also, Dr. Arduino has stepped into this game. This is a great way to get into this without having to buy a lot of parts. All of these have been reviewed in QST. Pioneer is their great way to get started. I call this the starter kit. It features several onboard components often used in your Arduino projects. I reviewed this in the November 2020 QST. It cost $99. And as you can see, it's got LEDs, it's got switches, it's got the 8 LED strip, and you can build projects. It's got the ultrasonic range sensor there. So you can build a whole bunch of basic projects with this. And then, of course, tie it in with a click and a slide. You can add this to your FazeDock, and now you can build out from even that. The nice thing is with things like this and the workbench, when you're done, take it off the bench and put it away. You don't have a pile of wires and stuff to clean up. You can leave your project put together. They also have a cover so that my demons can't open it up and build their own projects. But their next level is the Core. This is also an Arduino and Uno and Nano based system. And this is a great next level development system. Reviewed in the January 2021 QST, it's 189 bucks. And move up and beyond the Uno and the Nano, which are the basic Arduinos, you're going to look at something like this. Expressive. This is a high-powered microcontroller, very inexpensive, but we'll cover those in a minute. Great for creating those more complex projects that you're going to do. Excuse me. This was reviewed in the June 2023 QST, and it's about $300. The next thing you're going to want to do, and don't be afraid, learn how to read schematics. How many of you have looked at a schematic, put it down, and said, I don't understand, I don't want to know? This is for Einstein. All it is, it's a symbolic representation of the components and connections used to create a project. SparkFun and AdaRoot have excellent tutorials on their websites on how to read schematics. A quick search of other websites will give you just a whole bunch of how to read and schematics. There's also several books out there on learning to read schematics. And this will help you understand basic electronics. Diagram program, and as you do it more and more, you'll start understanding how these connections and how everything interacts and works together. The ARRL handbook is another excellent place to find all of this basic information. I mentioned before, parts is parts. For all intents and purposes, when we're in hobby use, the parts quality is the same no matter where we get them. While you get more for parts from places like Adafruit, SparkFun, Jamco, DB, as a general rule, there's not a lot of difference between these parts. And so say if you get them from Amazon, eBay, AliExpress, Banggood, that's 99% of my parts suppliers. Now, we will talk about some of the high-end parts suppliers like DARA and some other really, and you'll be amazed at some of the things these folks have. And but many of these suppliers have free or low-cost, shipping. I got Amazon Prime, so whatever I order off Amazon, I don't pay shipping. Just some basic parts. You want this stock on hand. Why? Because we get tired of singing Mr. Postman and waiting for our parts to get in here. Parts from overseas take about 2 to 3 weeks to come in. The more we sing that song, the more. But I have a printed list of parts, and I did not bring that in from the car. I apologize. But I'll show you here, and anybody who wants that list, just send me an email at kw5gp@arrl.net, and I will send you. But they're also shown on the following slides. There's typically only a handful of resistor values that I use on a regular basis. 220 ohm, 330, 1K, 2K, 4.7. That will cover you for 99 needs for your watt, because I'm not dealing with power. I'm dealing with 5-volt logic. 1, 10, 100, 1000, typically 25 volts or higher. The way a cap works is minimum. So 16 volts or thereabouts, you're not going to hurt yourself. But if you exceed the voltage rate, you can blow, and it makes a nice little fire. Diodes. I like power rectifiers. I use the 1N4004. This is shoot, I forget the thing on it, but they're 1 amp diodes, and they're good for power. You got your small signal, the 1N4148. These are for like your RF receivers and things like that. Schottky diodes, very same thing. They're loss diodes. Then you got your Zener diodes, which you can use for voltage regulation, and I usually get the 4.7 volt for that. Transistors, there's only about 2 transistors that I use, the 2N2222A and the 2N704NPN. I use those for switching predominantly. 90% of what I do is digital. I really don't play with analog. My weakness is analog. I leave analog to the Einsteins out there. Voltage regulators and LEDs. Since the average microcontroller onboard regulator can only supply about 800 mils, and it may be 3.3 volts, you usually are going to need an external voltage regulator for some of these big projects. The 805 5 volts, LM7812 for 12 volts, the LD117 for 3.3 volts. The number one thing we're going to want to play is we're going to use LEDs. LEDs for indication, have fun with. They're great learning tools. I get the 3 and 5 millimeter in red, green, yellow, and also the RGB, which give you all 3 colors, red, green, and blue. And I also use the addressable LED strips. They're WS2812 types. These are 8 LED on a stick, or you can get 10-meter long strips with 100 LEDs on them. And they're all addressable, so you only need one data line to actually turn on all those LEDs. And you can turn each one on individually, set its color individually, fade it individually, just all sorts of cool things. For pots, I typically use the 500K, 1K, and 10K. I use the standard 3/4 turn and 10 turn trim pot values. Whatever style and design you're happy with, whatever you want to do with your project, but I get a little bit of all of them. I use 5 and 12 volt relays. Why do we use 12 volts? 99% of our ham gear is running on 12 volts. So that and 5 volts, I got my relays covered. I get the standard and the little itty bitty dip read relays, but any relay will do. For my power, I use DC power jacks and also power pole connectors. I buy power pole connectors by the hundreds. They're just real easy to interface and work with. I also get rotary encoders. Those are great for controlling things. They make great tuning knobs and things of that nature. But the number one thing I like to use are these color thin film transistor displays. Typically the 1.8-inch ST7735 type and the 2.2-inch ILI 9341 type. Most of these displays are designed for 3.3 volts. In the Arduino world, they are coming, pretty much everything is going 3.3 volts. But since the Uno and Nano are 5 volts, you're going to probably want some level shifters, the TXB 0108 3.3 shifter. This shift bidirectionally for you. And you could use resistor voltage dividers. Bidirectional level shifters really work very nice. They're not very expensive. There are some really cool TFT display libraries out there that you can use in your sketches. This is Duduane's of the SI5351 direct digital synthesis VFO display that was designed by TJ Uebo, JF3HZB. And you remember the old rigs that, as you turned the dial, you literally had 3 speeds on the dial as it turned. The lower turned faster, the upper turned slower, and the top one turned even slower. That's what they're duplicating here on a thin film display. And that library is available on GitHub at Digital VFO with Analog Dial version 2. And I plan to incorporate this in projects, but that is an absolutely gorgeous display for a radio. Some of the other displays I like are the organic LED and the Nokia 5110, although they've kind of fallen out of favor. But the 5110 and the organic LED, they're smaller displays, but they're able to be seen in broad daylight, and they use very low power. Now, those of you that are familiar with the e-ink displays, there are some things that aren't really well known about those. Them right now. The manufacturers state, do not update more often than every 3 minutes, or it will physically damage the display. I don't want to build a project that if I update it every 2.5 minutes, at some point it's going to kill itself. No, if I'm going to break apart, I'm going to do it on my own. I don't need help. But while these do produce a high quality graphic image, when the power is turned on, that limitation is something you need. Also slow to refresh. They typically take 1 or more seconds to refresh the screen. And as per the Adafruit Learning Guide for e-ink displays, refreshing or changing the display more often than every 3 minutes can physically damage these displays. For this reason, if you're going to incorporate them in your project, do not forget that limitation. They may overcome this with time, but I'd hate for you to build something, spend all your time there, and then have to swap out the display because you keep breaking it. Don't blame me, although you will. But I would tend to avoid the e-inks unless you're going to do something like a name badge or something that doesn't update very often. The modules you're going to want to get, the AD9850 direct digital synthesis module is great for RF generation application. It generates a beautifully clean sine wave from 0 to 40 megahertz with an accuracy of 0.0291 hertz, and that thing don't drift. Yeah. So you're going to be on better frequency than most everybody else with it. The SI5351A is also very similar. It can generate frequencies from 8 kilohertz to over 150 megahertz, and it's got 3 separate outputs. Actually, most modules have 3 outputs. The difference here is that output is a square wave. What happens when you transmit a square wave? Harmonics and trash over the band. Usually a visit from the FCC at some point. The output a square wave, you're going to need to filter or smooth that if you're going to use it. I personally prefer the 9850, but a lot of folks use the 5351 because it's cheaper. And if you filter and smooth it correctly, you're not going to have any problem with it. Voice modules. You heard me talking about DF Robot. They have the graphics synthesis module. This is those text-to-speech applications. It's got an onboard speaker. Very bottom of external speaker connections. You talk to it using a standard TTL serial interface or the I2C bus. You also have the ISD 1820. This is a voice recording and playback module, a microphone on it. Has a recording capability of 8 to 20 seconds with a sample rate of 3.2 kilobits per second. It's got an on-chip 8-ohm speaker driver. This is great if you want to build yourself a little contesting memory. Or 2 or 3 of these and put them together and give yourself 3 push buttons, and guess what? You got a 3-message keyer. So now you know how I play field day. I cheat. 1,000 contexts on field day, but I think I've only manually said nothing but the report. And if I could get the Arduino to do the report for me too, I'd let it do that as well. But yeah, field day's over and I still have my voice. The voice recognition module from Adim is a shield that is a standalone voice synthesizer recognition shield for the Uno. It supports 150 full sentence voice commands and it's independent of the speaker. So anybody can talk to it and will understand you. It's got a built-in microphone. It also supports English, Spanish, and German. So guess what? You could use this to translate Spanish and German. Speak to it in English, play Spanish. So you can build your own little voice translator. The DF Robot Gravity Voice Recognition Module. This supports 121 built-in words and allows you to add up to 17 custom command words. And I did not add this. This came directly from their documentation. It even includes cat meow. It will connect using a standard TTL serial interface or the I2C bus. And now, how far are we from a voice-controlled shack or cat feeder or anything along that line? My concern is when the cats figure out that the feeder also controls the rig. And I come home and find out they get DXCC before I do. I will not be happy. There's also some really cool modules here. The DF Robot Gravity Gesture Sensor. This can recognize 12 hand gestures with a sensing range up to 30 centimeters, which is nearly a foot. This means that this can identify 12 separate hand gestures. So now think about this. I'm building a CAD interface for a radio. Let's tune down. Let's kick the amp on. Now let's turn the amp off. There you go. All by hand gestures. Let's rotate my antenna. Let's go left, let's go right. All from a gesture sensor. And this also connects via standard TTL serial interface or I2C. Let's just take a moment and think, what can you build just with hand gestures? There's so many cool things you could do. And we're going to talk about some really crazy things that you can do, because part of this, the whole reason I'm here is I want to put ideas in your head. I want you to go home and say, my gosh, I've got a page-long list of projects I want to build. And this is part of what I'm doing here. I'm giving you ideas on which I want one of you to come back next year and say, I built that CAD interface. And now I'm sitting in the living room and I'm working on W. And the rig's in the other room. And believe me, we're going to show you how to do that. Here's another module. While many of the newer microcontrollers do have integrated Bluetooth support, you might also want to have some of the old Bluetooth HC05 modules for the ones that don't have built-in Bluetooth support. And there's a reason for this. These modules can be used as either a Bluetooth master or a slave. And we're going to discuss a really interesting use for these in just a little bit. There's a special project. And those of you that have been to ARRL headquarters and work W1AW, you might be aware of where we're going here because you used it. And I bet you didn't know you used it. But we can also add some satellite technology. We can use the GPS module in several different ways for our microcontroller projects. In addition to telling me where I am, what does GPS do? Very, very accurate time. What do we do that needs accurate time? FT8. If we're out in the middle of a POTA activation and we can't get accurate time, our watch battery died, what are we going to do? Guess. We could use a GPS and it will give us accurate time. We can build a Stratum 2, which is about as close to atomic time as you can get. Time clock. I have a little $10 GPS module and a $2 or $3 display. Most of these, but some of them also have soil antenna in case you need a little extra sensitivity. These things are about 20 bucks. Here's a really us that are into weather. How many of us like watching weather and building weather things? This wind sensor comes from moderndevice.com. It uses a unique method to accurately measure wind speed. When you measure wind, you typically think of those spinning cups. Do you really want something mechanical or more? Let's use this. It uses what's known as a hot wire anemometer. When wind blows across something, it cools it. So what is how much current does it take to keep this little component heated to maintain the temperature as the wind goes? And it uses that difference to determine the wind speed. And it comes with two different models. And these are highly accurate measurements, by the way. The Rev C model measures wind speed from 0 to 60 miles an hour. So pretty much anything. For those of us that like to live dangerously, you've got the P model that will measure up to 150 miles an hour. You are more than welcome to stand outside and hold that up. I will not be there. But the thing is, now you can build your own severe weather station. With this little module out there, it's not going to be spinning cups that are going to turn your roof into a helicopter. It'll just be a very small module that can withstand the wind, and you'll be able to see what the wind is like at this location. Uh-oh.
Is that omnidirectional?
Actually, I take it back. It may be. I tested it, but generally, but see, because the actual sensor is right there. So theoretically, I would say yes, it could be omnidirectional, but I personally have not tested that. Good question. I'm going to have to go home and find out now. But to complement that, let's get a lightning detector. But the cool thing about this lightning detector, it will detect lightning at a distance of 40 kilometers. This is 24.8 miles. And you're going to see stairs. Well, you've got a storm coming. Don't you want to know how far away it is? Let's say you built this for your friends at a golf course. 25 miles gives them a chance to get off the course safely. Gets everybody a chance to get out of the pool safely. Gets everybody a site safely. Field day in Memphis about 8 years ago, we had horrible storms the whole weekend. As a matter of fact, the National Weathers, or the National Guard folks that we had with us recommended evacuating the site because the thunderheads were like 45, 50,000 feet. It was ungodly strong. And no, we worked field day. We stayed. The whole weekend was lightning storms. And in between, we had this lightning detector. So when it was not detecting lightning, we were out working the rigs. As soon as it lightning, we all went to safety and covered the rigs. It will tell you the distance. It tells you the distance to the leading edge of the storm. It uses an algorithm to calculate that. And it can detect cloud-to-ground lightning and cloud-to-cloud lightning. And it's also resistant to I2C and the SPI interface. And it, actually, I was just going to say that. You see that little numbered thing at the very bottom there? That is actually the antenna. It's one of those old little AM bar type antennas. And the reason for that, how many of us remember back in the AM days with those big ferrite bar antennas inside the radio? That's what that is on a minimum scale. Why is this? How do they have determined at 500 kilohertz a signature that can be analyzed with digital signal processing. And this chip is analyzing and looking for lightning on 500 kilohertz. So it's a 500 kilohertz signature looking for a specific signature. You've also got an MP3 player module. This uses a little micro SD memory card so you can store and play MP3, WAV, and WMV files. This is for serious contesters. Now you got MP3 files. How many? You know, you can do all sorts of things with MP3 files and projects. Think about your projects. Now you can talk to your dog while you're away. You know, put a sensor, you know, the dog's up on the counter, have the sensor tell the dog to get off the counter. Doesn't work with my cats, but I thought it would be worth a try. But it communicates interface. There's 5 folders of 255 MP3 files apiece. So you have an awful lot of audio choices here. You can literally make your own AI bot to converse with you with this module. Some of the other modules, so many available that would spend covered them. I usually purchase these on an as-needed basis from places like SparkFun, Adafruit, eBay, and of course, I usually order 2 or more. Why? I need a sacrifice. Gotta have a spare because I'm not gonna, if I'm on a project, I don't want to wait for a replacement. Also now let's talk about building supplies. You're going to want some basic supplies when you construct your project. I don't go direct to circuit boards. In fact, at this current time, I don't build my own circuit. I don't. So what I do, I use prototyping boards. For me, what I have found is these little 60 by 80 millimeter prototyping boards. I love these things because they're small. Most of my projects fit on them. And they fit inside the SolarBotics safe and mega safe enclosures that we'll see in a minute. And for Arduino projects, I like to use what they call a prototyping shield. That is a prototyping board that mounts on top of an Uno with the header pins and everything like that. So that's pretty much where I build. To wire it up, I use 30 gauge Kynar wire on the backside. And you can get this wire in many, many colors. So now you can color code your projects, you know, black for ground, red for 5 volts, orange for 12 volts, things of that nature. White I use for signal lines. And so now you can look at your project and troubleshoot it because you can see where the wiring is. And you know instantly this is being $3. I was going to say, it's not my time yet. Upgraded version of the 8266. It's running... that's the ESP32. It's running the Tensilica 32-bit CPU. This goes up to 240 megahertz. It's got up to 16 mega flash, 38 to 77 I/O pins. If your project won't fit in there, you've got a really big project. Got to up to 18 12-bit analog pins plus 2 8-bit D to A pins. It's got onboard capacitive touch switch sensors, 4 SBI channels, 2 I2C channels, and 3 serial. You've also got 8 channels of infrared remote control. So now you can add infrared remote control to your projects. So now you can control the TV set. You've got 16 channels of pulse width modulation. It also has an integrated Hall effect magnetic sensor. This also costs about $3. It's
also got
Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, yes. You've got the Arduino Nano 33 BLE. This is actually pin compatible with the original Arduino Nano, but it operates only at 3.3 volts and it will not support anything 5 volt. It's a 64 megahertz 32-bit CPU, 1 mega flash, 256K of RAM. So now you can build some pretty hefty projects with this thing. Got 8 12-bit A to Ds, and it also has a built-in 9-axis inertial measurement unit. So now this can detect motion in 3 axes. It's also got Bluetooth and Bluetooth BLE, and it's 26 bucks. You've got the Nano ESP32, and this again is also pin compatible with the Nano at 3.3 volts, but it is not 5 volt tolerant. It'll go up to 240 megahertz with 32-bit ESP32 CPU, 128 meg flash, 512K RAM. This is a horse. 384K of ROM. It's got Wi-Fi and Bluetooth as well. It also has Arduino and MicroPython support. We'll get into that in a little bit. It's 20 bucks. You've got the Arduino Nano RP2040. Those of you that saw my seminar last year, how we were under the Raspberry Pi Pico, we'll talk about that in a minute. But it is pin compatible with the original Nano, but again, operates at 3.3 volt, is not 5 volt tolerant. It's got 133 meg dual core processor, 16 meg of flash, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Bluetooth BLE. It's got a built-in microphone and a 6-axis inertial measurement unit. And it also supports the Arduino and MicroPython, 22 digital I/O pins. But it's up at 30 bucks. That's a little expensive if I'm going to make smoke. So, but you've also got the Uno R4. This is a 5 volt tolerant. This is literally a drop-in replacement for the Arduino Uno. It's a 48 megahertz CPU, 256K of flash. The cool thing I like about it though is it is directly replaceable. So now you can take a 16 megahertz Uno and turn it into 48 meg. It's also got onboard Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. You can select that A to D to be 10-bit or 14-bit. It's got onboard CAN bus, real-time clock, and it also supports the Arduino and MicroPython. They've got two versions, one with Wi-Fi and one without, but again, we're at 20 and 27 bucks, so we're still a little bit up there. But now here's my favorite, the Raspberry Pi Pico. 133 megahertz dual core Cortex M0 Plus, 2 meg of RAM, 2 meg of flash, 256K of RAM, 26 digital I/O pins, 3 12-bit A to Ds, all those cool buses. It's got an on-chip real-time clock and temperature sensor. Now we're down to 4 bucks. This is one of my personal favorites, but there's some other reasons why. The cool thing about the Pico, the language that it runs on can be changed with a simple press of that boot select button. In addition to the MicroPython and CircuitPython and C++ that it comes with, you can now add the Arduino ecosystem to make it plug compatible with the Arduino IDE. And there are now 2 versions of BASIC, MM BASIC and Piccolo BASIC. So now we can go all the way back to 1980 and play with BASIC. So, hey, there are some of us that miss BASIC, okay? I'm one of them. I mean, think of the programs we wrote in BASIC back then. We wrote complete finance and accounting systems in BASIC. Let's get real. But it is still my personal choice for high-end projects due to speed, I/O capabilities, language, versatility, and the price. By the way, while I'm here, let's take a quick break. Has everybody gotten a card for the drawing and the bag? Okay. Okay, pass the bag on down.
There's no cards. We don't have any cards.
What now?
Ran out of cards. We only got 3.
Only got that far with the cards?
Yeah.
Let's see if we can fix that. I'm glad I asked. We got you covered. All right. We'll do it this way. Yeah. Just take a ticket, tear it in half, and keep the stub. Don't have to fill your name out. So those of you that don't have the...
Does it matter what you want to give them?
No, it doesn't matter. They all have the number.
And these are for the people that didn't put the thingy in the bag,
Correct.
right? Okay.
Yeah, if you put your ticket in the bag, you're already entered. The bag's going to pass around.
Oh, you have the bag? No, I cut the bag. All right.
Yeah, we'll just pass the bag on down.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you. Give me the bag now. Okay. Who else? Full rules. Everybody else.
These are two of the prizes we're going to be giving away. These are my current Arduino books. And my new one is coming out in about 3 weeks. We'll talk about that. Yeah. Tear off one, keep one, and put one in the bag. Oh, well, you're going to need to pass that around for people to drop their tickets into.
Well, no, we're gonna drop this one in.
Right. Okay. Okay, I got it. I'll stay out of it. He's got it. At this point, I only tend to mess stuff up. This was a test to see how many of you were paying attention and how many had fallen asleep. And while he's doing that, we'll continue on a little bit. We're in good shape. At some point, you're going to want to design your own microcontroller projects. You may also want to share your work with others. Yeah, let's go ahead and catch up on this. Does anybody have any questions to this point? Yes, sir.
I guess you kind of already answered this. Do you have a preference between Arduino or Raspberry Pi?
Well, there's two different animals there. The Arduino is a microcontroller. The Raspberry Pi is a microcomputer that runs Linux. I prefer the microcontroller because they're two different critters. One's a computer, one's a controller. Think of a microcontroller as the engine management computer in your car. And a Raspberry Pi, it's a computer. It's a PC in a box. Yes, sir.
So, I've been trying to program the Pico in C++, and I just find that all the libraries they're not compatible.
Right.
I mean, they seem to work okay in Python.
Yes.
So I switched over to using the Nano ESP32, and that seems to be really good.
Yes. Yeah, the libraries aren't quite up there yet, and but they're getting there. And I'm viewing the Pico as a great way to transition from the Arduino up to Python, because Python has been considered the basic of the modern era. It's really easy to work with, and I think at some point we're all gonna all be on Python. It's just slowly getting there. I had that same discussion last year. I still have not learned Python, by the way. Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
You're not doing Python. Are you doing all your writing in C? Or?
I'm using the Arduino IDE, which is a C++ version. A simplified version of the C++, and I'm a simpleton, so I like the simple stuff. But at some point, you're going to want to document your work in a standard format. There are several free schematic generation programs out there. You can document and share your information with others and put them on the internet and everything. You can also use these to create the files you will need to make your own circuits. Up to this point, I have used the free version of Autodesk's Eagle. However, transitioning Eagle to Autodesk Fusion in 2020, personal use with some limitations, and this is it'll still be free for students, educators, startups. But why do that? KiCad is a free open source software suite for schematic capture, PC board layout, circuit emulation, other built-in features. I personally am transitioning to KiCad, and I really recommend everybody go to the KiCad open source if you're going to be creating schematics. It's free, and it's really well supported. If you want to practice with the Arduino and other microcontrollers, there are several web-based Arduino simulators that you can use. You don't even need an Arduino now. Arduino Simulator is an open source Arduino simulator written in JavaScript that will run code directly in your web browser with no other hardware needed. It supports the Uno R3, the Mega 1280, 2560, and the Nano V3. WowKey is a browser-based simulator that supports the ESP32, Arduino, and Raspberry Pi Pico RP2040. And these are all online browser-based simulators. Here's some more new technology. Meshtastic is an open source project that uses inexpensive LoRa, which is long-range radio technology, used to create a long-range off-the-grid communication network. This runs on the instrumentation, scientific, and medical bands, and they have a distance record of 254 kilometers at 415 and 900 megahertz. You can automatically form a mesh network to rebroadcast messages to other nodes. So think of it as a variation on the old Hamnet mesh networking. And it's supported on the ESP32, the NRF52, and the RP2040 microcontrollers. So what's next? My book, More Arduino for Ham Radio, is currently available from ARRL. After this seminar, I will be at the ARRL booth, and I will sign books and talk to you if you want to come over and have fun. ARRL is in the process of publishing my latest book, The Best of Arduino for Ham Radio. This should be out in about 3 weeks. And also, we'll talk about that one in a second. ARRL and I have worked out a plan for future books. These are focusing on ham radio applications for the Internet of Things and the Raspberry Pi Pico. I also have an upcoming QST article about a wireless, Bluetooth wireless CW keyer. And this has been in operation at W1AW for over a year. No, wait a minute. What? I said wireless twice. What is radio? Wireless. What is Bluetooth? Wireless. What's a keyer? Wired. Most keyers connect over a wire to what? The rig. This is Bluetooth wireless CW keyer. It uses a pair of Arduino, the HC05 Bluetooth modules, to wirelessly remote. Remember a little bit ago I said that you could sit in front of the TV set and work CW? We already have Bluetooth earpieces, right? So we can hook our rig and give us Bluetooth audio. You had your keyer nightstand right next to you at the TV. And now you can key while you're watching TV and work while you're watching TV. You can use your gesture sensor for the cat, transmitted over Bluetooth. It plugs in. The keyer itself plugs into the remote unit. No other wires. It's battery powered. There is no wire from the remote unit to the rig. There is another unit on the other end that is plugged into the rig. Your keystrokes fitted Bluetooth. Now here's the interesting thing when you use these Bluetooth. What is Bluetooth? It's serial data. It's sending serial ASCII. How am I sending key contact commands over ASCII? Trick. Basically, what this thing does, it